Chapter 538. Su Xinxing didn't bother to pay attention to the other party's investigation. Of course, it wasn't because he was tired of being a good person and wanted to change his taste to be a bully. He just felt that it was too much of a waste of time to wait for the other party's investigation. If he didn't have any clues on his side, he could only wander around like a headless fly in the burned world fragments. Now that the clues were right in front of him, how could Su Xinxing sit still and wait for the other party's so-called investigation? Su Xinxing didn't know the inside story of the fallout shelter, but he had traveled to countless civilization spheres and seen various political systems under different external conditions. Although he didn't know how long the end of the world had come, from Ravi's skillful behavior he could probably guess that it had been a long time. In this apocalyptic world, to be able to maintain the operation of an organization, and to not let the order collapse even after experiencing a terrible destruction, the most important thing about it was not the spirit of innovation or change, but rather the spirit of conservatism and stability, prioritizing the status quo of the fallout shelter. In this way, it was inevitable that the people in this management organization would be quite vigilant against all outsiders. Su Xinxing really didn't have the extra energy to wait for their investigation, and he was not interested in some old-fashioned face-slapping scenes. He didn't think that the inspector sent by the management organization would be an easy guy to talk to. In this world, even water and food, or something similar to life in this world, could not guarantee an adequate supply, and the arrival of Su Xinxing's group was bound to make this shortage even more severe. This was enough for the inspector to be hostile to them. It was precisely because of this that he chose the option of breaking through directly after learning about the current situation. Damn it! You guys are really heartless people who are contaminated by the ravings of the abomination. The patrol captain named Lubathan roared, "Everyone, get ready for battle." And sound the alarm. Under his order, the patrol soldiers lined up towards Su Xinxing's group, raised their crystal spears and formed a square formation. However, the phalanx was broken by Su Xinxing alone almost in the blink of an eye. If it wasn't for Su Xinxing's mercy, this group of people would have suffered heavy casualties. "Ravi, which direction is the boss you mentioned?" After easily breaking through the patrolling soldiers, Su Xinxing asked the round-faced boy who ran over with him. At this time the round-faced boy was already dumbfounded by the sudden change. After being asked by Su Xinxing, he seemed to come back to his senses and trembled. His eyes flashed with a trace of hesitation and then he pointed in a direction. "There, the boss's residence is there." "Understood. When we're done we'll definitely come back to thank you." Therefore Su Xinxing threw him into a hole on the side of the road to prevent him from being mistakenly killed by the pursuing soldiers. After doing all this, he turned and ran in the opposite direction of where the youth had pointed. "Benefactor, you're running in the wrong direction." Chang Shaoxian, who had witnessed the whole process, hurriedly shouted. "No, that's right," Su Xinxing said without changing his expression. "That little guy probably thought we were bad guys with ulterior motives, so he deliberately pointed in the opposite direction." "Is that so?" Chang Shaoxian was a little skeptical. At this moment, a sound similar to that of a gong could be heard from every corner of the huge cavern. That should be the so-called alarm. "The guy in front, hurry up and surrender. Stop and put your hands on your head. Otherwise we'll shoot." Because he needed to take into account Chang Shaoxian and the others, Su Xinxing didn't run too fast. After a while he saw many people who might be soldiers at the end of the road. They all held things that looked like corn stalks in their hands. Su Xinxing thought that was probably the translation of gun from the protection. It seemed that there were not many firearms left in the world. "Surrender? How dare you be so disrespectful?" Lu Wu, as a god, was immediately angered by the other party's words. The moment he took the next step, a dazzling white light flashed. Then a giant beast that looked like a tiger but was the size of a double-decker bus appeared and rushed toward the soldiers with a momentum that far exceeded that of a tank. If it was an ordinary person, their legs would probably go soft when they saw this scene. But the fighting spirit of the soldiers far exceeded Su Xinxing's expectations. Not only did they not collapse, but they also began to fire at Lu Wu. Blue sparks appeared on the top of the corn stalks, and from the firing frequency, it was probably a weapon similar to a Gatling gun. But it was useless. As the god that controlled the gate to the celestial realm, let alone bullets, Lu Wu's skin could not even be pierced through by ordinary missiles, much less harm him. "Lu Wu, you can't kill people." Seeing Lu Wu rush out, Su Xinxing warned. After all, they were the ones who attacked first. If they killed the other party, the enmity would be too big. Su Shenxing didn't want to destroy this world that was on the verge of destruction again. Roar. Lu Wu let out a slightly depressed sound, probably understanding Su Shenxing's meaning. After receiving Su Shenxing's warning, he didn't kill anyone. He simply broke through the enemy's formation and caused a ruckus inside. Finally, the morale of the remaining troops of the enemy collapsed, and the soldiers began to flee. After that, the three of them didn't encounter any other resistance and safely arrived at the center of this sanctuary. It was a sparkling and translucent crystal platform that was still magnificent and magnificent. A woman in her 30s was sitting cross-legged on the platform with a long sword made of crystal on her lap. When she saw Su Shenxing and the others walk up the steps and appear at the edge of the platform, she slowly stood up and raised the crystal sword. I knew that this moment would come one day to destroy the last spark of humanity. This is the only common goal of those abominations who have been fighting endlessly. Her face was twisted with regret. But I can't accept it. Is this the end of humanity? Su Shenxing slowly walked toward her. She also raised her sword. Although it wasn't a flashy posture, it could be seen that she was quite accomplished in swordsmanship. But Su Shenxing ignored her. He just walked past her and came to the bonfire behind the woman. He stared at the spiral spear in the bonfire, and the expression on his face had become one of excessive surprise and dullness. Why is this thing here? Chapter 539. What the hell do you mean by that? The woman who was ignored by Su Shenxing did not know whether to put away the crystal sword or continue to hold it. She could not help but roar in anger. But Su Shenxing still did not have the intention to pay attention to her. Or rather, his attention was all on the spiral spear. Although it was called a spiral spear, in fact only the tip of the spear showed a spiral shape, and the body of the spear was more like a wantonly growing branch showing a more twisted shape. The main color of the spear leaned towards black, but there was an exception. On the body and the tip of the spear, there were 7 different colored pearls slightly larger than an egg. Those pearls were not inlaid or welded on the spear, but magically suspended all over the spear. After careful observation, Su Shenxing determined the origin of this thing. This was a weapon from his former comrade. Not the kind of comrade who was in a single lattice world and had limited time together, but a comrade who had been with him since Olivia all the way to the Great Devil Realm, in the true sense of the word life and death. There were a total of 14 people in Su Shenxing's brave squad. But after the last battle in the Great Devil Realm, only 7 people survived, including Su Shenxing. The owner of this weapon happened to be one of those 7 people. The woman who continued to be ignored by Su Shenxing finally could not hold back anymore. She was about to attack Su Shenxing, but was stopped by Lu Wu and Chong Shaoxian. Even if the woman really used the crystal sword to cut Su Shenxing would probably be fine. But Chong Shaoxian still remembered Su Shenxing's kindness, so he subconsciously reacted when he saw the other party's action. As for Lu Wu, it was even simpler. As a weather-beaten elder, he judged that the woman would not be able to hurt Su Shenxing when the other party attacked. But on the other hand, if Su Shenxing pursued why he did not help, he might have to eat a tortoiseshell of love and harmony again. So after a short moment of judgment, he stood between the two like Chong Shaoxian. Just as the woman was about to use some kind of hidden technique, the entire shelter suddenly shook. Many green water droplets suddenly appeared on the ceiling that was inlaid with many crystals that emitted faint light to simulate the starry sky. Although the water droplets didn't look very big from the surface, considering the distance, the volume of each green water droplet was probably not much smaller than a private car. Chong Shaoxian felt like she was staring at the sun. Her eyes stung and she couldn't help but squint. Careful. Don't look at that. Lu Wu warned in a low voice. Just looking at that thing can poison your eyes. An ordinary person's eyeballs might even be burned by this poison. It's an abomination. How is this possible? The woman, who had been aggressive just a moment ago, collapsed to the ground. Her face revealed a look of despair that was far more profound than before. The holy object and the seed of fire are still here. As she spoke, the water droplets finally dripped down from the ceiling and covered more than half of the shelter. Ordinary creatures would probably be immediately melted into cheese if they touched them. In fact, the ceiling had become full of holes. This guy should have used this method to directly ignore the mechanism of the corridor and invade this place. There was no doubt that the residents of the fallout shelter would not even be able to resist the pure liquid that possessed properties far beyond that of aqua regia that could dissolve and erode everything. In just a few breaths they would all be dead or injured. "So noisy, don't disturb me." At this moment Su Shenxing turned his head and glanced at the unknown abomination that was descending from the sky as he said coldly, "Don't worry." The woman sitting on the ground shivered for some reason. She was surprised. Su Shenxing's voice wasn't loud, but she had a feeling that perhaps the entire shelter could hear it clearly. Could it be an illusion? But in the next moment, the abomination quietly floated in the air in a state that defied the common sense of physics. In the next moment, the abomination, which had been aggressive and seemed to want to completely destroy the last remaining human civilization in the blink of an eye, disappeared just like that. What on earth happened? She couldn't help but tremble. She was terrified by this situation that was far beyond her understanding. Not only her, but even the Chong Shaoxian was confused by what had happened in that instant. Could it be that benefactor had made a move? She guessed in her heart. The only one who vaguely sensed something was Lu Wu. Unlike the Chong Shaoxian who had just inherited the divinity of a new god, Lu Wu was a senior existence even in the entire Huaxiao divine system. Although his strength wasn't the best, he had enough knowledge and insight. In addition, Su Shenxing's attitude towards him was subtly different from his attitude towards the Chong Shaoxian, so he was the one who knew best what had happened in that instant. Its killing intent. He thought about the chill that seemed to freeze the true core strength and immortal force in his body and guessed in a hoarse voice, "If I'm not mistaken." Just now when Mr. Su said those words he released his killing intent. At this point he felt that his mouth and tongue were dry, and his throat was stinging as if it was being burned by fire. He couldn't say a word. It was just a wisp of killing intent, but Lu Wu felt that it was a terrifying move that he had never seen in his life. If the Heavenly Emperor's prized magic treasure, the Supreme Heavenly Mirror, was fully activated, and the divine light that could even kill immortals was used as a unit of destruction, then the killing intent in that instant was conservatively estimated to be in the millions. It was a terrifying force that absolutely no creature or material on Earth could resist. It was a force that could easily penetrate and melt Earth. That abomination didn't even have the qualifications to withstand this killing intent. The moment it was caught by that wisp of killing intent, it completely evaporated and disappeared from the world. It didn't turn back into the laws of the world like the previous abomination. Instead, the world was destroyed and even the source of its existence couldn't be found. It was completely and irreversibly reduced to nothingness. If Lu Wu didn't know how strong Su Shenxing was before, then that wisp of killing intent made Lu Wu finally understand what a strange existence Su Shenxing was. Su Shenxing had already transcended the power of gods and Buddhas and was above all the immortals in the heavens. Even if all the extraordinary existences in the heavenly court, the demon realm, and the underworld attacked together, they wouldn't be a match for Su Shenxing. At the same time, he also understood how much Su Shenxing had wavered because of that spiral spear. Chapter 540. Although she did not know what had happened, there was no doubt that the disappearance of the abomination had something to do with the man in front of her. As the leader of the fallout shelter, the woman's brain was naturally not damaged. Whether the man in front of her had the power to command the abomination or could scare it away, she did not believe that the abomination could be killed. He was not someone she could deal with. In fact, from the beginning, the other party's fearless look had already proved this point. After weighing the pros and cons, she finally gave up the choice of confronting the other party with a sword. "Who are you people? What's your purpose here?" After dismissing the soldiers who had finally rushed up to the crystal platform and wanted to protect her, she asked Su Shenxing and the others with an expressionless face. "Why did this thing appear here?" Only then did Su Shenxing turn around and ask the other party, "Are you talking about the holy relic?" The woman paused for a moment as if she was recalling something. "That's a very long story. Just make it short," Su Shenxing said without hesitation. The woman seemed to be choked and subconsciously rolled her eyes. But then she immediately calmed down and began to tell the story of the past. Like many stories, the beginning had to be told from a long, long time ago. That was when the world had not collapsed and humans were not on the verge of extinction. At that time, the woman was just an ordinary girl. "Wait a minute, I think the time it took for you to change from a girl to what you are now can't be described as a long, long time ago, right?" Chong Shaoxian raised his hand and interrupted the other party. "How old do you think I am now?" The woman did not answer directly but asked first. I'm 30. Chang Xiaoxian tried to guess. Unfortunately, I'm more than 150 years old. The other party shook her head and announced the correct answer. The power of the holy relic has greatly delayed my aging and allowed me to witness the decline of the world. Now the children in the fallout shelter have never seen the world before the destruction. When they are born they can only see this burned wasteland. The peaceful and rich life of the people in the past is almost like a myth. Chang Xiaoxian was suddenly speechless. The woman didn't continue talking about this topic. Instead, she continued to narrate the story. At that time, no one realized that destruction was right in front of them, including me. Until one day my peaceful life was disrupted by an uninvited guest. A strange look appeared in the woman's eyes. That's a man with a physique stronger than a bear and eyes sharper than an eagle. At that time he smashed through the ceiling of my house and fell directly into my room, giving me a fright. By the way, the words bear and eagle in this sentence were translated from blessed. The original words should be some kind of similar animals that originally existed in this world. When the woman said this, Su Xinxing's eyes lit up. However, she didn't continue to describe the man's appearance. Instead, she continued to tell the story. At that time, the man's condition was not good. Not only was he unconscious, but his body was also wrapped in bandages. In addition, he could vaguely see blood seeping out from under the bandages. It seemed that the wound had split open. For some reason, the woman, who was alone at home at that time, didn't call the police or an ambulance. Instead, she took out the bandages at home and rebandaged the man. When I untied the bandages on his body, I was stunned. I never thought that a human could survive such a serious injury. Even after hundreds of years, when the woman recalled this scene, she couldn't help but sigh. There was also a long spear wrapped in canvas that fell into her house with the man. That's right, it was that holy weapon inserted in the bonfire. However, at that time, the woman couldn't move the spear at all because it was too heavy to lift. In fact, this thing is not physically heavy, but it leans toward the heavy principle. Under normal circumstances, it won't smash through the floor or sink directly into the soil. However, neither humans nor machines can pick it up without the consent of the original owner. When it came to spears, Su Xinxing interjected and explained, which was rare. You know about the holy weapon? The woman was a little surprised. I also contributed to the casting of this thing, what do you think? Su Xinxing replied with a smile. I see, then I was rude. If the woman had a perfunctory attitude before, she just wanted to get rid of Su Xinxing and this group of troublemakers as soon as possible. Now she finally understood that Su Xinxing was on the same level as the person she respected. It was only now that she felt sincere respect for Su Xinxing and the others from the bottom of her heart. After he lay in my room for a day, the end of the world suddenly came. Then the woman began to tell the main story. The sky shattered like a mirror, as if there were countless invisible boulders falling from the sky, smashing the city into pieces. The earth collapsed and the terrain changed dramatically in seconds. People fled in panic, but no place could be considered safe. After that, even time itself had problems. The surrounding architectural styles constantly changed from one era to another, and so did the clothes on the people and the various scenes on the messy streets. The woman's face darkened as if she was recalling the terrible past. Lu Wu also showed a look of understanding. It seemed that the constantly changing ruins outside were probably a manifestation of that time. Just when my house was about to be crushed by a collapsed building, that person woke up. When the woman said this, Chang Xiaoxian noticed that the woman's tense face relaxed. Her face, which didn't show her age, showed a little girl's longing and nostalgia. After understanding the situation in a few seconds, he didn't use the holy weapon. He just waved his hand and split the collapsed building in half with his hand knife. I always feel that this description is subtly familiar. Chang Xiaoxian's eyes fell on Su Xinxing. Among the people she knew, Su Xinxing was the only one who could do this without the help of magic or treasures. He was the only one who could do this with his physical body. At this time, Su Xinxing had a straight face and no one knew what he was thinking. After that, he said that in order to repay the kindness of my treatment, he protected me all the way to this shelter. At that time, this was just the largest underground parking lot in the city. The woman didn't stop because of Chang Xiaoxian's words. She just continued to tell the story of the past. Because of the changes in the terrain, this parking lot has long been changed beyond recognition. but he thought it would be safer here, so he decided to let me stay here for the time being. Then he ignited this pile of seed fire that could burn forever without any fuel, and inserted the holy artifact into it. He asserted that as long as the holy artifact was still there, I would be able to survive here. What about him? At this time Su Shenxing suddenly asked. He left after doing all this. The woman replied sadly. He said that he had done something wrong and let down a person named Su Shenxing. In order to make up for his mistake, he had something to do. After he finished, he would come back to get the holy weapon. But more than 100 years have passed and he never appeared again. Chapter 541. Benefactor, do you know that person? The Chang Shaoxian asked. In fact, judging from Su Shenxing's words, the man who left the sacred artifact in the woman's mouth was definitely related to Su Shenxing. The Chang Shaoxian was just using this as an excuse to let Su Shenxing continue talking. Yes, he was one of the few friends I had. Su Shenxing nodded slightly. In the past he had traveled to countless worlds and met all kinds of people, but those who could really be called friends were only the few who accompanied him all the way to the Great Devil Realm. And the owner of this sacred artifact was also one of them. That's right, it was the burly man with the silver-haired little girl that Su Shenxing saw in the memories of this world. His name was Jumbo Kompanchit and he was a friend that Su Shenxing had already met in the other world of Auravia. Jumbo was a barbarian, and he was also the child of prophecy among the barbarians. The surname Kompanchit in Auravia's barbarian language meant Grey Mastodon. When the barbarians' habitat was invaded and compressed by the Demon King's army, countless barbarians died in battle, and the survival of the entire race was in danger. The barbarian great chief obtained a prophecy with the help of the ancestral spirit. The prophecy mentioned that a person from the Grey Elephant tribe would lead the barbarians back to the Emerald Plains and achieve their great revival. But this prophecy was learned by the Demon King's army at that time, so the other party simply slaughtered the barbarian tribe mentioned in the prophecy. At the most critical time, the wife of the Grey Elephant tribe's great chief gave birth to a son. So the great chief who pinned all his hopes on his son did not follow the tradition of the tribe and pass on his surname that represented the trunk of a giant elephant to his son. The members of the Grey Elephant tribe all had surnames that represented the body part of a giant elephant. Instead, he passed on the surname of the ancestor of the central barbarians, Grey Elephant, which was Kompanchit. After that, the Grey Elephant tribe's great chief let the wolf he raised carry the child to look for the barbarian great chief, while he and the members of the other tribes all died in battle. The rest of the story was naturally the cliché of the chosen one's revenge after he grew up. If there was anything different, it would probably be that Jiang Bo met Su Shenxing during his revenge. Among all the people Su Shenxing had met, Jiang Bo was the one who kept the agreement the most. With Su Shenxing's help, Jiang Bo drove away the Demon King's army on the Emerald Plains. Because he had made an oath to Su Shenxing, he did not follow the other barbarians to recuperate on the Emerald Plains. Instead, he followed Su Shenxing to attack the Great Devil Realm. In the beginning, Jiang Bo, who was blessed by the heavens and favored by nature, was the strongest fighter in Su Shenxing's party, second only to Su Shenxing in terms of combat prowess. In fact, when they first met, Jiang Bo was even stronger than Su Shenxing, who had yet to fully master the shining sacred sword. However, as they broke through one lattice world after another, the enemies they encountered became stronger and stronger. Su Shenxing naturally went without saying. After passing through endless despair and pulling out one cursed sacred sword after another, he had already transcended the category that could be measured by ordinary strength. The members of his party were also constantly strengthening themselves. Whether it was knowledge or ability, they were rapidly improving at the speed of inflation, just like in hot-blooded leveling novels and anime. Only Jiang Bo was in a deadlock. His strength came almost entirely from his strong body and the favor of the world. However, even if his body was strengthened to the limit, he was still too insignificant in the face of a battle that could surpass the level of the world. As for the favor of the world, when the world itself was displayed in an exhibition cabinet and its origin was extracted, it was even more useless. So, the once strongest person became the weakest in the party and could not even defeat Lucky Charm. In order to break this situation, the wise man in the original party proposed an idea. Since there was a time when a person's strength was limited, why not simply ask the world for help? It was not limited to the favor of the world, but to use the world itself as a part of the weapon to enhance combat power. This proposal was undoubtedly tailor-made for Jiang Bo. Except for him, no one in Su Xinxing's brave team could be sincerely accepted by the worlds. Not to mention all kinds of strange guys, even Su Xinxing had accidentally destroyed a world, so naturally, the will of the world would stay away from him. Under the advice of the wise man, Su Xinxing found several worlds in the Lattice world that were extremely hostile to the Great Devil Realm. The life that they originally bred had been wiped out by the destruction of the Great Devil Realm. When a world lost all observers, which was the essence of life, the world itself would be like Schrödinger's cat, in a situation where it existed and did not exist at the same time. Through the dialogue with the will of the world itself, in the end 7 of these worlds agreed to become a weapon just to take revenge on the Great Devil Realm. So, after stealing the matter of the world's origin from the Great Devil Realm, Su Xinxing began his first and only real forging under the guidance of the team's master alchemist. Of course, the final result was still very subtle. The body of the spear, which was full of beauty in the design, was crooked by him, looking like a tree branch that grew very casually. Yu Xingjing. Although I think a lot of people have already forgotten about this fake loli who was temporarily staying at Sakura apartment, looked at Emily with her usual dead fish eyes. Even though there was a huge commotion at Sakura apartment before, this girl was the only one who did not show up and always kept herself out of the situation. At this moment she was wearing a pair of glasses from God knows where. She had a bird's nest hairstyle that wasn't much better than Jasmine's. She was wearing an old-fashioned sportswear that didn't match the season at all. She was barefoot and was holding a cup of vanilla ice cream in her hand. She looked exactly like an otaku who had specially come downstairs to get snacks. If it wasn't for Emily blocking her path to the stairs, she probably wouldn't even greet the little girl. Oh. Emily let out an unclear sigh. A subtle expression surfaced on Yu Xingjing's face. She took a step to the side, but Jasmine immediately took a large step as well, blocking her path once again. This made the otaku Yu Xingjing's eyes twitch. If it wasn't for the fact that she couldn't beat him, she probably would have already thrown Emily out. Jasmine obviously didn't have this self-awareness, and only continued to stare at the other party with eyes wide open. After a while, Yu Xingjing realized that Emily's gaze seemed to have stopped on the ice cream in her hand. So she put her hand behind her back. This won't do. If you want to eat, go buy it yourself. Seemed like this guy went out just for this ice cream. However, it was understandable. After all, old Su wasn't rich enough to have such an extravagant ice cream, to him, like ice cream in the fridge at home. Humans need to understand each other. Emily said seriously, say it. No, you and I aren't humans, right? In every sense of the word, we are. Yu Xingjing, who was not affected by Emily's nonsense, obviously would not be convinced by it. She retorted with an embarrassed expression. Emily went silent. So Yu Xingjing prepared to take this opportunity to leave. But before she could take 2 steps, she was blocked by Emily again. The world will be destroyed because of this, Emily said in an extremely serious tone. Say it. Don't destroy the world over such a small thing. Just how stubborn are you about this ice cream? Yu Xingjing couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Forget it, I'll give you a bite. Just 1 bite? Well, why is it this ambiguous sound again? Yu Xingjing sighed again and took out the wooden chip that was given to her by the convenience store. She scooped a bit of ice cream from the paper cup and handed it to Emily. Come, oh. Emily ate the paper cup in Yu Xingjing's other hand in 1 bite. Ah, this is too much. This is the sugar that I rely on for a living. Yu Xingjing immediately looked like she had suffered a huge blow. Chapter 543. Lu Wu naturally didn't know where those guys from Mount Wangu were now. But he was sure that they were still somewhere in the Kunlun orbit. As long as they took the River Moon and drove in the opposite direction, there was still a possibility of catching up with those guys. Although this probably determined what to do in the future, there was still a more important matter waiting for Su Xinxing's decision. He couldn't leave the divine spirit 7 glory of Zheng Suk in this world fragment. Su Xinxing just confirmed that there was no mark left by Jiang Bo on the divine spear. The reason why the people in this world fragment couldn't pick up the divine spear was purely because they were too weak. To be honest, it wasn't that difficult to enter such a broken world. If a slightly stronger existence with evil intentions were to enter and pick up the divine spear, it would probably cause a rather serious dimensional disaster. Judging from Ying's strength, even the top 10 of the Space Administration wouldn't have an easy time getting rid of the mortals with the divine spear. Therefore it was almost certain that they would retrieve the divine spear. But now, this world fragment almost relied on the divine spear to maintain its stability. And even the existence of these survivors relied on the self-consistent laws of the 7 lattice worlds on the divine spear. Once Su Shenxing took the divine spear from the seed of fire, this world fragment would probably collapse in an instant. You haven't looked for the holder of the divine spear for so many years? Not wanting to disturb Su Shenxing, who was in deep thought, Chang Shaoxian asked the woman. Of course we have looked. But after the catastrophe of the world's destruction, the area we are in seems to have been cut off from the mother planet. There are invisible walls in all directions trapping us on this land. The woman shook her head and replied. Su Shenxing frowned. It seemed that this world fragment was a little smaller than he thought. It only had a limited amount of land and it didn't even have a planet. But what was interesting was that this small piece of land had almost 70% of the laws. It was a pity that it could not self-regulate and maintain a minimum level of self-operation. Otherwise, this little bit of the laws might be enough to allow this world fragment to continue existing and eventually develop into some strange special world. Hold on, there are still so many remnant laws? Su Shenxing suddenly patted his head. That's the case maybe. Tisk, it's a pity that I don't know much about this. Just as our hero was talking to himself, his expression suddenly froze. A moment later, an indescribable surprise crept onto his face. Are you finally awake? What do you mean? Chang Shaoxian, who didn't know what had happened in Ying's apartment, asked in confusion. Of course, it's the guy with the same heart as me. Su Shenxing grinned and gave him a thumbs up. Suddenly, Chang Shaoxian felt that Su Shenxing's gloominess and impatience had disappeared like the mist in the early morning. The funny Su Shenxing had returned. In the next moment, the space around Su Shenxing began to distort slightly. Then, a little girl with her hands raised high and made a gesture of praising the sun appeared there. I'll join you, 3 points. That's not a lot of readers. Emily, it's better if you don't use such an incomprehensible joke. Landlord, you're surprisingly strict. Complaining is righteous. It's hard to agree with the standards of righteousness, but Emily, you slept for a long time this time. Using a novel as an analogy, he slept for about 36 chapters. Oh landlord, I've missed you so much. If you could wipe off that thing that looks like ice cream from the corner of your mouth, I'd probably be more touched. As soon as the two met, they began to have a confusing conversation. However, Chang Shaoxian, who had seen this scene many times, had an expression that said, "That's right, I felt like I was missing something before." The corners of Lu Wu's eyes twitched uncontrollably. He was probably worried that Su Shenxing alone was hard enough to deal with, and now there was another little guy who could press him to the ground and rub him against the ground. How would he survive in the future? Only the woman who had been guarding the platform was relatively calm. She had an expression that said, "Oh, there's more." It seemed that the repeated shocks to her worldview had numbed her nerves. Even if an abomination suddenly appeared in front of her and danced a samba, she wouldn't be surprised. So what's the situation now? Emoli tilted his head as if waiting for Su Shenxing's explanation. Su Shenxing coughed lightly, then replied, "To put it simply, something like this happened." "What kind of explanation is that?" Lu Wu couldn't help but complain. "So that's how it is. I understand now." Jasmine nodded her little head. "Did something like that happen? Why do you understand just like that?" "Telepathy? Telepathy." Lu Wu roared in a manner that was very fitting of his identity as a complaining master. If there was a table in front of him, he probably would have flipped it over without hesitation. However, Su Shenxing and Emoli both ignored this guy's complaints. This caused Lu Wu's heart to suffer 10,000 points of damage. "In short, it's decided that it's you, Emoli. Leave it to me." Emoli patted his flat chest, then closed his eyes. Although there was no wind on the platform, Emoli seemed to be surrounded by a gust of wind, causing the girl's messily tied-up blonde hair to dance wildly. Around them, whether it was the Chang Shaoxian, Lu Wu, or the pitiful woman who had yet to be named, they all felt their hearts palpitate as if they had been completely seen through. After a while, Emoli opened his eyes and said, Oh, there's actually that." Her expression and tone didn't change at all, which formed a contrast with the obvious surprise in the content of her words. Should it be said that this was also a kind of cute point? As expected, but there are still a lot of laws left in this world fragment, so it's normal for there to be that part. Su Shenxing said casually. What are you talking about? The pitiful woman suddenly had a bad feeling. She stood up as if she wanted to do something. However, Su Shenxing's reaction was faster. He had already reached the bonfire and grabbed the godly spear stuck in the fire. To put it simply, he calmly replied, I've decided to give this world a new life. In the next moment, under the woman's shocked and despairing gaze, he pulled out the godly spear. Chapter 544. The woman was furious. Do you know what you are doing? She was so angry that her whole body trembled. She pulled out the crystal sword that she had put back on her waist. If you take away the sacred weapon, the flame will soon be extinguished. The last hope of mankind, is that so? Su Shenxing tried to wave the spear in his hand and answered nonchalantly. Although he made this thing, he had never used it before. Now he felt a subtle sense of pleasure when he held it in his hand. The origin of this pleasure was probably because, other than the holy sword of the Roland duel, this spear was one of the few weapons that he did not have to worry about accidentally breaking. After he pulled out the spear, the surrounding scenery began to change rapidly. The originally solid crystal that was different from Earth began to melt rapidly like ice under the sun. The rock layer above also collapsed, but when the rock fell from above, it became smaller and finally disappeared. That's right, it did not turn into dust but completely disappeared without a trace. The underground fallout shelter slowly rose to the surface. The surrounding ruins that looked like the end of the world. Well, I know the word like is redundant, gradually changed. The barren wasteland gradually became green. First there were fungi, then ferns, and finally large patches of various green plants rose from the ground, turning the desert into a green space. The sound of flowing water could even be heard from afar. The ruins were covered by plants and only a few corners could be seen. The ruins of the black buildings that were originally filled with despair and silence had a different kind of beauty against the green grass and red flowers that were full of vitality. If one had to describe it, the originally dead world seemed to have been reborn at this moment. The process that should have taken tens of thousands of years or even longer was completed in just a few seconds. The crystal sword in the woman's hand also melted at the same time as the changes in the earth. She was like the survivors under the platform, looking at everything around her in shock. What the hell happened? To put it simply, other than people like you who are being protected, Su Shenxing said, the land outside is about 800 million years old. 800 million. The woman obviously did not believe Su Shenxing's words and looked puzzled. Su Shenxing was not lying. Most of the 800 million years were used to transform the environment and lift the fallout shelter from the ground. In fact, the plants only started to grow a few 100,000 years ago. Just like Earth, although its history could be traced back to more than 4.6 billion years ago, the birth of life was only a few 100 million years ago. In fact, the earliest life forms were algae in the sea about 3.5 billion years ago, which was the Uranian period, but the creatures on land were born later. Most of the time before that was to form and stabilize the geological form, the Proterozoic period. Landlord, something's here. When Jasmine opened her mouth to speak, only then did the woman notice that this little thing had unknowingly appeared by her side. What made her even more curious was that this little fellow was holding an object that looked like a crystal ball in her hands. Speak. After noticing the woman's gaze, the little guy tilted his head. With his slightly messy blonde hair, he looked a little cute. It's been hard on you to adjust the world's course. Leave the rest to me. Su Shenxing naturally understood what Jasmine was talking about. He took down the divine spear that he had been carrying on his shoulder and assumed a slightly awkward starting position. It's been too long since I've played with a long weapon. I've completely forgotten the basics. When the woman saw the divine spear, she wanted to say something, but before she could ask, a sudden fear gripped her heart. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat. Like an unoiled rusty robot, she turned her head stiffly. On the other side of the horizon, countless huge figures appeared. The towering fir trees were only about the height of the figures' ankles, which showed how huge they were. They were approaching at the same time. The figures were different. Most of them did not have the posture of a human. They seemed to be a mixture of human fear, the purest of freakishness. Even if they only existed in the distance, just a hazy figure could trigger the deepest fear in people's hearts. Even looking at them from afar would make one's scalp tingle. As the figures slowly approached, the survivors were already praiseworthy for not falling into a complete mental disorder. There was no doubt that those were the abominations. The world's laws had mutated, and the images of the world's fundamental distortion. Sushensing and Emoli wanted to save the world, which was equivalent to becoming enemies with them. They wanted to cut off the reason for their existence and make them disappear completely from the world. Therefore, even if they vaguely knew that they were no match for the two, these monsters that were equal to the world's greatest calamity gathered together and launched a final charge at the two who wanted to restore the world. If you're humans or well-trained warriors of other races, I would have to admire your courage and offer my respect for your willingness to fight to the death. But if you're just beasts that don't even have complete self-awareness and can't even feel fear, you're not even worthy of me being serious. Sushensing didn't know if it was because this scene reminded him of the past, but he actually said something that was a little chinibyu when facing the strange monsters that were coming at him from all sides. If it was someone who did not know Sushensing, such as the woman with the gaping mouth, they would probably think that he was too arrogant. Then Sushensing waved the deformed spear in his hand. Just as he said, he did not seem to be serious at all. It was just like breaking off a willow branch and waving it casually when he was bored. It was not worth mentioning at all. But it was such a perfunctory attack that the gigantic creatures that were like living typhoons stopped in their tracks. In the next moment, their bodies turned into dust as if they were weathered, and then collapsed one by one with a loud bang. The laws have been received, reconstructed, and compiled. World restoration begins. As the abominations were wiped out, Emoli, who was holding the crystal ball, softly muttered. The crystal ball released a faint light as she spoke. Seeing this, the little fellow nodded in satisfaction and added, "Speak." Therefore, after the abominations were completely wiped out by the mysterious young man, the woman finally saw the sun rise again after more than 100 years. Chapter 545. Is this the sun? As one of the survivors, Ravi looked at the slowly rising ball of light in surprise. In fact, it was not only him, but the other survivors also had the same expression. I always thought that the sun was just a legend, something made up by the old people. Lubatham, who finally found Ravi, also raised his head in surprise. For him who had only seen two sources of light, bonfires and luminous mushrooms, there was no doubt about the power of the sun. I never thought that there would be a big ball of light in the world that could emit light and heat and illuminate the whole world. In addition to the sun, the surrounding plants also made them overjoyed. For the survivors, finding a weed was already a great harvest. Being in the surrounding forest and grassland was like falling into a dragon's treasure pile. They were so happy that there was no end to it. But after all, the survivors had lived under a highly centralized system of order, so they did not fall into a situation where they could not find the north after falling into a sugar jar. With the boss, the woman beside Sushensing, whose worldview was completely shattered, giving the order, almost all the survivors began to return to their original positions, methodically carrying out their original tasks. Perhaps in the future, because of the rich resources, their minds would be active, but that was not something that Sushensing and the others needed to worry about. I feel the changes in this small world. God Lu Wu frowned. Rather than saying that it is self-contained, it is more like it is attached to a bigger secret world. Sushensing glanced at him. He did not expect the Lionhead's perception to be so sharp. Indeed, even the current Sushensing could not do something like creating a world. Perhaps the original sacred sword of origin could do it, but now it had become the sacred sword of the end through an irreversible process. Old Su could not turn it back. In addition, Mo Li's unsealed state may be able to create a new world. But now, only the third seal was unsealed and the little girl's situation was already in a mess. If she continued to unseal it, she would probably have to destroy the surrounding world before the age of destruction. So Sushensing simply used a trick. He happened to have a lattice world Loren visa beside him. That's right, it was the one that Emoli was holding in his hand. Loren visa was an incomplete world. It was not that it lacked some kind of material or some kind of life, but it was incomplete in terms of laws. Originally, the Loren visa world was on the verge of destruction. It was precisely because of this that the former world king, Dagita, tried to launch a desperate rebellion against the space administration of Midsurda. But in the end, it failed under the intervention of Su Shenxing. After that, although Su Shenxing squeezed it into a lattice world, the hidden danger of the law flaw was temporarily alleviated, but it was still like the sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of all the lives of Loren Visa. Therefore, when Emily was having nightmares, Su Shenxing and Queen Tarbal of Loren Visa had made a deal. Tarbal agreed to lend the Sword of Truth to remove the Earth from the timeline at that time to prevent the Earth from being destroyed when Su Shenxing lifted Emily's nightmare. In return, Su Shenxing had to solve the problem of the law flaw for Loren Visa as soon as possible. Originally, Su Shenxing planned to find the original comrade who sealed Emily. That guy's sealing technique had already reached the peak of perfection. He could even fabricate a false law out of thin air that could even deceive the world. At that time, as long as he could come up with a false law that temporarily filled the flaw of the law, he would naturally have fulfilled his promise. And he could also reinforce Emily's seal while he was at it. But plans could not keep up with changes. Although this world fragment had been seriously damaged, it contained a considerable number of laws. Although there was the credit of the godly spear, this world fragment could still maintain its shape after the apocalypse that destroyed the entire world for so long, indicating that it had this law in itself. In addition, Su Shenxing's blow just now had killed thousands of abominations. After the abominations died, they returned to the world and changed back to the original law, further reinforcing the strength of the law of this world fragment. And some of them just happened to be the law that Loren Visa needed. With this in mind, Su Shenxing simply let Emily unify the laws of the two worlds. After all, many basic laws were not the same in different worlds. For example, the definition of the fundamental force of the universe, the definition of elementary particles, the definition of the speed of light, and so on. This process took about 800 million years. After that, Su Shenxing used the power of the godly spear to kill the abominations. He also shattered the law transformed by the abominations into the energy closest to the origin of the world. Using this as a material, he welded the world fragment to Loren Visa. After doing all this, they ushered in a new world. And the woman also had a general understanding of the situation through Su Shenxing's simple explanation. She hurriedly issued orders to prevent the people from being distracted. When Su Shenxing and the others were about to leave, there was a sudden distortion in the sky. Then a starship with a futuristic sci-fi and gothic style at the same time appeared there. Although Su Shenxing was quite a distance away from the survivors, he could still perceive that the survivors were frightened by the sudden appearance of the starship and were whispering to each other. Although this world is a little broken, after all, Su Shenxing still had the tendency to be amenable to coaxing but not coercion, so he sighed and explained to the girl who seemed to be about to cry. A little broken? Tarbal frowned and scanned the surroundings. Although there was now verdant vegetation as cover for Tarbal, who had extraordinary powers and magical technology, the essence of the world that had experienced a catastrophe and appeared to be broken was still visible at a glance. Well, although this world is very broken, its weight, well, it's not lower than your Loren Visa. You just said probably in a very soft voice, right? Ahem, don't mess around. You have to know that in other parts of this world fragment, there may be an existence that even I can't ignore. Su Shenxing, who had been exposed, didn't look embarrassed at all. He said this seriously. Is there really such a person in the multidimensional world? In a sense, Tarbal, who could understand Su Shenxing's combat strength the most intuitively, muttered in a low voice. Su Shenxing coughed to hide his embarrassment. Of course, he was just secretly changing the concept. Although Jiangbor was indeed an existence that Su Shenxing could not ignore, that guy's combat strength was not strong. Even on Earth, he probably only had the combat strength to resist nuclear bombs with his body and blow up an aircraft carrier with one punch. In fact, except for himself in another world, Su Shenxing had never met an existence that could be on par with him. Even if the seal was fully unlocked, Emily in full power mode could only be considered a small part of it. Moreover, even Jiangbor was not from this world. He was just passing by. Don't give up on your dreams, peace. Oh no, the strong do exist. Su Shenxing continued to fool him. Su Shenxing interrupted him. Let's go back to Bai's hut first. The group of people returned to the small wooden house where Bai Zhe was. In the end, they found that the door of the wooden house was wide open. The messy things that had been piled up inside had all been cleared away. The table and coffee table were lined up in a row. There were even fruits and pastries on the coffee table. Yitu Huitian was there serving tea. "You're back." Seeing the group of people appear at the door, Huitian revealed a gentle and virtuous smile. "Please wait in the hall for a moment. Lord Baizhe will come out soon." Then Artemis rushed forward and grabbed her rabbit ears. "Ouch, ouch, ouch. Lord Artemis, what are you doing?" Her expression immediately collapsed and turned back into a pitiful expression. "Ah, it's actually the real deal." Artemis uninterestedly let go of his hand. "That's more like it. I thought you'd definitely been modified by her. That's too much. I'm still the princess of you too." Huitian weakly protested. However, at this time Su Xinxing and the others had already ignored their little drama and sat down in their chairs. Emily looked left and right for a while before running to Su Xinxing's side and sitting on his lap. "Landlord, if you want to eat oranges, tell me." All right. Su Xinxing helplessly picked up an orange and began to peel it. However, for some reason the flesh under the orange's skin looked blood red, and the texture of the flesh was somewhat similar to that of a dragon fruit. "That's a cinnabar fruit," God Lu Wu explained to the curious Su Xinxing. Emily swallowed the cinnabar fruit in Su Xinxing's hand in one gulp. Then, accompanied by a few mumbling sounds, his cheeks squirmed for a moment before he swallowed the entire fruit. "It's not as good as an orange." "Is that so?" Su Xinxing picked up another orange and looked it over. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but when Artemis ate the cinnabar fruit he seemed to hear the sound of an upgrade. At this time the inner door suddenly opened. A beautiful woman in a palace dress slowly walked out from inside. "You've completed my request, so according to the agreement, I've also completed my side." The person who came was naturally Baizhe. She looked at Su Xinxing and said, "But because I still needed to prepare some things, I was a little slow." Then, without waiting for Su Xinxing to react, she stepped aside and allowed the person behind her to walk out of the door. It was a young girl dressed in a style somewhat similar to Baizhe's. "Qingyan." Su Xinxing couldn't help but smile when he saw the girl's face. But then he frowned because the girl's aura had become a little strange. "Senior, thank you for your hard work." The girl gave Su Xinxing her usual gentle smile. Emily jumped down from Su Xinxing's lap and ran to Qin Xingyan's side, sniffing around like a dog girl. Then she tilted her head in confusion and said, "There's the smell of a nest. Let me explain this." Baizhe didn't intend to keep them in suspense. Instead, she said to Su Xinxing and the others, "Actually, this girl was fine before." "What?" Su Xinxing was taken aback. He recalled that when he first came out of Mo Li's dream, Qin Xingyan was covered in blood and on the verge of death. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem like she was fine. "Child, you're cultivating the Jindan Dao, right?" Baizhe asked Qin Xingyan. Yes." Qin Xingyan was a little hesitant at first, but thinking that the people present were either great gods or primordial creatures, it seemed that no one would care about the cultivation method she practiced. So she simply answered, "I'm cultivating the Bailu Temple's secret Xuanzhen Jindan Qin Yusu." Moreover, through the previous seclusion, the girl had become the youngest cultivator to set foot on the Jindan Dao in modern times. Although Mr. Su's future is a blur, if it's something that has already happened, I can still see some clues. He must have channeled some kind of power into you, right? Baizhe continued. "Yes." Speaking of this, Qin Xingyan probably remembered what had happened at that time. A faint blush appeared on her face and she slightly lowered her head. "According to my conjecture, that kind of power was rather domineering. When it entered the young girl's body, it directly destroyed the young girl's 8 extraordinary meridians. Even the golden core that was cultivated with great difficulty was swallowed by that power. At that time, young girl, you must have looked very miserable, right?" Baizhe asked with a faint smile. Although Qin Xingyan's face was full of lingering fear, she forced a smile and shook her head. "No. What you should be thankful for is that although that power is incomparably tyrannical, it has endless uses. After it destroyed the original cultivation system in your body, it began to rebuild your body, soul, tendons, bones, blood, flesh, and skin. Cleansed your marrow and meridians from head to toe. In every sense of the word, it was as if you had been reborn." Baizhe finally revealed the main reason. "It's just that this kind of reconstruction is very barbaric. It made your body look like it was going to collapse at any time. I only helped to preserve your life so that you could survive this rebirth. Then my current cultivation level. Qin Xingyan seemed to have only just found out about her previous symptoms, so she couldn't help but show a worried expression. From the perspective of a cultivator, your cultivation level has completely gone down the drain. Bai Zhe said in a deep voice. How could that be? As she spoke, she raised her hand, wanting to release a small flame as per her usual habit. As a result, a huge ball of flame rose from her fingertips and almost blew a hole in the roof. Wah! Even Qin Xingyan herself was taken aback. How was this the appearance of losing her cultivation level? It was obvious that her cultivation level had greatly improved. I wanted to tease you. Because this power came from that guy, so now even my child's future may be affected. Bai Zhe held the side of her face with one hand as if she was a little troubled by this. What's going on? Qin Xingyan asked, speechless. Didn't I tell you? Your body has changed because of that power and now you're no longer a human. Bai Zhe replied, if I have to say, you're like a celestial being or a primordial species, an existence that has far more power than mortals. Su Shenxing was also shocked. So Mo Li's magic had this kind of effect. But then he frowned again. To be honest, although Su Shenxing didn't transfer his magic power to others many times, it wasn't like he hadn't done it before. Of course, the transfer method was definitely not through kissing, but more direct physical contact. However, apart from a slight decrease in efficiency, there shouldn't be too much of an impact. However, those who had received Jasmine's magic had either completely transformed into powerful magical creatures or exploded like balloons. Only a few of them were able to grasp and use the little bit of Jasmine's magic that had been transferred to them to do something. It was the first time that Qin Xingyan didn't mutate into a monster, but instead seemed to have evolved. The others were also curious about Qin Xingyan's transformation, but that was it. After all, when Su Shenxing sent Qin Xingyan here, they all saw him on the verge of death. None of them wanted to become a dead dog. No matter what, welcome back, Xingyan. After a while, Su Shenxing extended his hand to Qin Xingyan. The girl also returned to her previous gentle smile. Yes, I'm back, senpai. Although they wanted to continue drinking tea and chatting with Bai Zhe, they had other things to do. Thus the group once again set off in a mighty manner. Although Su Shenxing originally wanted Bai Zhe to see if there were any world fragments in Mount Wangu, Bai Zhe's eyes were still affected by the world fragments, so he could only see the hazy future. He couldn't clearly predict whether the thing Su Shenxing was looking for was there or not. After rejecting God Lu Wu's offer of a tram, Su Shenxing and the others once again boarded the River Moon, which was idling on the platform, and chased in the direction of the Mount Wangu secret realm. By the way, how long have we been gone? On the way, Su Shenxing asked the few people who stayed behind. Although they didn't even spend a full day in the world fragment, of course if Mo Li's catalysis time was included, it would be 800 million years. Su Shenxing couldn't be sure that the flow of time in the world fragment was the same as the outside world, so he could only determine how long they had been in the Mount Wangu secret realm. About half an hour, Artemis replied. Almost an hour, Hui Tan replied. About half a day, Jiang Yu replied. It seemed that the flow of time here was much slower than in the world fragment. However, even in the most optimistic situation, the Mount Wangu secret realm had already been gone for half a day. If that was the case, they could only use other methods to catch up to them. Mo Li, leave it to me, the little girl said confidently. Then she stuffed the 2 cinnabar fruits in her hand into her mouth and swallowed them with difficulty. With the help of Su Shenxing, she climbed to the roof of the train and raised her hands. Suddenly, except for Su Shenxing, the other people in the train were caught off guard and pressed into their seats by several G-forces. Too fast. It's going to derail. Jiang Yu's intermittent voice came from the front of the train. At the same time, while the scenery outside the window was rapidly changing, Su Shenxing also saw the hill built on the tram not far away. Emily, slow down, be careful not to hit it. So he shouted. Now Jiang Yu's speed was probably far beyond the speed of a normal bullet, and her acceleration didn't decrease because of this. If she continued to speed up, he was afraid that they would really hit it in a while. Under Jiang Yu's control, the train held onto the track tightly, and with all her strength she didn't fly off the track when she turned a corner. At this time, Emily finally understood Su Shenxing's meaning. Then she slammed on the brakes. The result of this was that the 4 girls in the train directly flew out due to inertia, and fell into a pile in front of the train. Fortunately, their physique was far stronger than humans, otherwise they would have become a pile of bones. Su Shinxing seriously considered for a moment, and felt that it was too fake for him to jump into the group of girls at this time. How could there be such a delay due to inertia? So he regretted that his reaction was too fast and gave up on this temptation. On the roof of the train, Emily was like a cannonball, and because of the force of inertia, he directly flew out, and then only a clang sound was heard. The little girl directly smashed someone's glass. Oh no, it was the array outside the Mount Wanggu secret realm and fell into an unknown corner of the mountain. Jiang Yu, follow behind them, don't come into contact with them first. Seeing all this, Su Shinxing could only curse in his heart. He looked at the 4 girls who were still in a dizzy state, and then directly said something to Jiang Yu, who was the only one who could still stand. Then he climbed out of the window and with a strong jump he smashed a second hole in the array, and jumped into the Mount Wanggu secret realm that was alarmed because of Emily's invasion. Junior brother, when we meet the invader later, you rush over and stab the thief, then I'll follow up with a stab. Remember, you must make sure that the thief has no power to fight back. Su Shinxing walked on the mountain path, and didn't have the heart to admire the lush scenery around him. He just wanted to find the girl before Emily made a big mess, but in the end he heard 2 people talking from afar. That's not right. Senior brother, your cultivation is higher than mine and I'm not skilled enough. If my stab doesn't work, instead it will make the thief more vigilant, and then it will be difficult to make a move. How about this, when we meet the thief later, senior brother, you rush over and stab him first, then I'll go and end him. What do you think? Junior brother, are you afraid of that thief? Senior brother, the same goes for you. Then in my opinion, why don't we directly return to the main hall and tell master that we didn't find the thief? Senior brother, it's rare for us to come out. Why don't we secretly go to the herb garden once, and while looking for the thief, take some spiritual medicine as backup, and then pick some extra spiritual medicine as a gift to master? Wouldn't that be perfect? Ha, you're right, when it comes to these things I'm not as good as you. Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry up and move. After saying that, the 2 silly senior brothers saw Su Shinxing opposite them. Chapter 547. Hey, could it be that you're that thief? Senior brother is right. You little thief, do you think someone like you can barge into the secret realm of Mount Wanggu? I guess it was an unintentional mistake. Why don't you retreat quickly? Otherwise, don't blame us for being ruthless. Senior brother, this person has barged into the secret realm. We can't let him go like this. Otherwise, we won't be able to explain it to master. Junior brother, you're right. But I don't think he looks like a bandit. How about this? If you can survive 3 moves from us, we'll let you go. Senior brother, there's no need to talk about morality when dealing with thieves. Let's go together. Okay, junior brother, give me a hand. Su Shinxing didn't say anything. The 2 clowns talked to themselves and decided the matter. Then the 2 of them shouted "Ada," like Bruce Lee, and flew towards Su Shinxing like crows on an airplane. Because the other party's posture was too perfect, Su Shinxing felt that he would be sorry if he didn't kick them. He couldn't help but kick them twice, and the 2 of them directly fell to the ground. OF*CK junior brother, what should we do? Cough, I didn't expect you to be a senior expert. My senior brother had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us. The latter crawled up and bowed to Su Shinxing like a golden mountain toppling a jade pillar. Junior brother. The senior brother looked at the latter with a stunned face. Senior brother, An ashamed expression appeared on the junior brother's face. He turned his head and no longer looked at the senior brother, who was still sitting on the ground. Junior brother, you're right. Then the senior brother immediately got up and bowed to Su Shinxing with the etiquette of a junior. I didn't expect you to be an old senior who cultivated in seclusion. Junior has been rude. This time not only was Su Shinxing dumbfounded, but even the junior brother had a confused look on his face. However, because these 2 clowns were flattering and adhering to the principle of not hitting a smiling person, even Su Shinxing couldn't continue to beat them into a pig's head. I wonder what senior has come to the secret realm of Mount Wanggu today? The senior brother rubbed his hands, and the expression on his face didn't feel out of place even if he acted as a fat translator in an anti-Japanese film. Senior brother, you're wrong. Senior is a hermit expert. Even if there's an important matter, he must have come to find our master. How can we intervene in this matter? Junior Marshall brother is right. Senior Marshall brother has failed to consider this. When Su Shinxing heard this, his interest was piqued. However, the magic treasures on the shelf were actually real. While he was flipping through the things on the shelf, a golden light barrier suddenly rose around the room. Soon after, a complacent laughter was heard. An old man appeared outside the light barrier at the door. Fellow Taoist, this poor Taoist disciple should have already said not to casually flip through the secret treasures of my Mount Wangwu's secret realm. What do you think we should do now? Oh. Su Shinxing didn't deny and indifferently replied. Even if fellow Taoist pretends to be calm, it's useless. My restriction was set up with reference to the legendary Great Celestial Star Formation. The light barrier was made with the first ray of dawn and the last ray of afterglow gathered every day for over 100 years, mixed with the aurora of the extreme north. It could trap all tangible, tangible, and intangible objects in the world. Even the celestial venerable might not be able to open it. The old man stroked his goatee and said proudly, "Is that so? So you also have no way to come in?" Su Shinxing continued to say with an indifferent face. A corner of the other party's complacent expression collapsed, but he immediately returned to normal. Fellow Taoist, you also don't want to be locked in there forever, right? How about this? As long as you hand over the cultivation techniques, magical abilities, and the magic treasures you used to break into my Mount Wangwu's secret realm, this poor Taoist will let you out. Wait, fellow Taoist, what are you doing? Old Su didn't answer. He just casually picked up a magic treasure from the shelf and then gently pinched it. With a crackling sound, the rare magic treasure was crushed into pieces by him. I accidentally used too much strength. Haha. Su Shinxing threw the pieces in his hand to the ground and lightly knocked on his head. He stuck out his tongue, but there was no feeling of cuteness at all. On the contrary, it made people want to cover their eyes and shout, "Ah ah ah, my eyes." The impulse. Rather than saying it was spicy to the eyes, it was already to the extent of stuffing the entire Chaotian pepper into the eyeballs. Ah ah. Ancestors' treasure. You scoundrel, I won't let you off. It seemed that the other party was really angry enough that he didn't even call himself this poor Taoist. Su Shinxing was unmoved. He continued to pinch the magic treasures on the shelf one by one like he was pinching bubble paper. The expression of the old Taoist outside changed from bleeding in his heart to almost having a myocardial infarction. His face also changed from ashen to purple and finally to the current deathly pale. When Su Shinxing finished pinching the magic treasures on the shelf, the old man was still murmuring, "I won't let you off. I won't let you off." Su Shinxing naturally didn't care about this. When he finished ruining the magic treasures, he stretched out his hand and pushed the golden light curtain open like he was opening a door. The old man outside and the dozen or so disciples behind him were stunned. Su Shinxing gave them a sunny and brilliant smile that was not hostile at all. Then he clenched his fists. 3 minutes later. Alas. I actually wasted so much time because of such boredom. Old Su half sat on the main mahogany seat in the lobby like a monkey, staring at the cultivators kneeling in the lobby. These guys, including the old man, had all become swollen pig heads. "So, you still don't have any impression of the thing you used to bribe God Lu Wu? Senior, this poor Taoist. Oh no, this one really doesn't know anything." The old man cried and scrambled to answer, "That thing was mixed in with the jade stones that the younger disciples gave me as a tribute. This one also doesn't know where it came from. Although this one barely recognized that it was a strange treasure, this one also doesn't know what it is. Otherwise, this one definitely wouldn't have given it as a gift. This guy is probably telling the truth." Su Shinxing sighed. Could it be that the clue ends here? No, at least it's certain that the other fragments of that world still exist on Earth. Forget it, you guys get up. Someone come and take me to your kitchen. Senior, are you going to have a meal? I can let the outer disciples help you prepare. The old man stared blankly and then carefully asked. No, I'm just going to find the other guy who came in. Su Shinxing rubbed his forehead. Emily hadn't come to look for him for so long, most likely because he was distracted. The only thing that could attract that little foodie's attention was food. Sure enough, Su Shinxing found Emily in the messy kitchen, who was standing on his tiptoes and trying to reach the air-dried chicken hanging up. Landlord? Mo Li, who was grabbed by the collar by Su Shenxing like a cat, didn't forget to grab the air-dried chicken into his arms before looking at Su Shenxing. Let's go home. Whoa, when they left the secret realm of Mount Wangu, the screams of awe, the food we prepared for 10 years is gone, naturally had nothing to do with them. Chapter 548. Good morning, landlord. Early in the morning, Su Shenxing woke up when he felt a familiar pressure on his abdomen. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Mo Li kneeling on his abdomen in a sitting position. Say it. Don't eat while sitting on me. Su Shenxing helplessly looked at the little guy munching on the biscuits, the biscuit crumbs sprinkling all over him. Mo Li tilted her head, probably thinking that it was not good to eat while sitting on someone. So she changed to eating while standing upside down. That's even worse. Landlord, you're so capricious. Who's the capricious one? Yesterday's magnificent day finally came to an end. After returning to Earth and sending Jiangyu back to the museum, Su Shenxing went to bed without doing anything else. Even for him, it was rare for him to squeeze such a mess into a single day. Although he wasn't physically or mentally tired, for some reason he felt mentally tired. After chasing Mo Li out of bed, after washing up and brushing all the crumbs on the bed into the trash can, Mo Li casually sat on the bed. Landlord, help me comb my hair. Okay. Su Shenxing was like a parent who was being pestered by a naughty child. With a gratified and helpless tone, he obediently combed Mo Li's hair into a double ponytail as usual. Mo Li jumped and ran 2 laps around the room, then nodded as if she was very satisfied. Big-breasted people have already prepared breakfast. Let the landlord go down and eat quickly. Big-breasted. Su Shenxing thought about it according to the size of the breasts of Sakura Apartments residents and frequent tenants. Then he felt that this girl should be talking about Songyu. So the two of them went downstairs together to prepare breakfast. After arriving at the living room, Su Shenxing found that in addition to himself, Qin Xingyan and Yu Xingjing had also arrived. The former was sitting upright at the table, while the latter had thick dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he would smash his face on the table at any time. Noticing the arrival of the two, Qin Xingyan's eyes lit up and he greeted Su Shenxing with a sweet smile. Senior. Today, Qin Xingyan was dressed a little differently than usual. She wore a white Cheongsam-style sleeveless jacket on top and a pair of blue denim hot pants on the bottom. She was as youthful and beautiful as usual, but at the same time she had an indescribable mature charm. Just the two of you? Su Shenxing asked curiously. Chiketsu and Miss Chihaya are still sleeping. According to previous experience, they probably won't wake up until around 7 o'clock. Miss Sakura Kanji took Wang Chan out for a walk. Based on Wang Chan's physical strength, it might take her 1 or 2 hours to walk around this neighborhood several times before she comes back, Qin Xingyan replied concisely. I see. I didn't expect you to wake up so early. Su Shenxing's second half of the sentence was naturally directed at the absent-minded Yu Xingjing. I'm going back to sleep after this dinner. Yu Xingjing was like a computer with insufficient memory. After a long delay he suddenly replied. It seemed that this guy stayed up all night to cultivate again. Is there something wrong with your biological clock? This is how our line of work works. Yu Xingjing raised his thumb. Writing novels is a dead end. After saying that, he fell on the table with a thud and his consciousness faded away. Wasn't she a boot leveler before? Su Shenxing asked. I think it was because she felt that it was too slow to make money. Then some time ago she saw the news of a student author earning 40,000 yuan a month, so she changed her line of work to become a web novelist, Qin Xingyan replied. Don't look down on a poor young man. Yu Xingjing, who was sleepwalking, suddenly shouted. It seemed that he was still writing in the same style as before. Su Shenxing and Qin Xingyan were speechless. At this time Mo Li, who had been waiting impatiently, began to knock on the table with his chopsticks. Fortunately, not long after, Song Yu and De Hei came out with plates to set the table. Otherwise, there might have been 288 holes in the dining table of Sakura Apartments. There were not many dishes for breakfast. They were all relatively simple things. Fried eggs, bacon, fried ham, and a plate of fried golden crispy small fragrant fish. The main course was also roasted fragrant and crispy sliced bread and soft and fragrant white rice porridge. Perhaps Emily had eaten too much yesterday, but he seemed to have lost his appetite. He was full after eating 12 slices of bread filled with ingredients and half a pot of porridge. Song Yu and Qin Xingyan did not eat much either. Due to the change in the nature of the latter's life, he could already abstain from eating. It was just a habit for him to eat. Therefore Su Shenxing ate the rest of the food. During the meal, Su Shenxing even picked up a small fragrant fish for fun and stuffed it into Yu Jingjing's mouth. Yu Jingjing showed no signs of waking up at all and ate the fish in his sleep. Halfway through the meal, Qin Xingyan suddenly asked Su Shenxing, "Senpai, are you free today?" Su Shenxing thought about it casually and realized that he did not have any reservations. Although he was very interested in the world fragment, it was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack if he wanted to find other fragments on Earth. He couldn't just go up and use his cloud scale to detect if a piece of glass was a world fragment, right? So he decided to leave it to fate. "Nothing, what's wrong? Then can you go shopping with me?" Qin Xingyan took a deep breath and then asked seriously. The bread in Song Yu's hand fell into the porridge bowl. Her face was full of shock. However, Su Shenxing, who was unaware of this, just replied, "It's not impossible, but I don't have money. Even if I like something, I can't buy it for you. It's okay, as long as Senpai can go with me, I'll be very happy." Seeing that Su Shenxing had no intention of refusing, Qin Xingyan replied in surprise. After Song Yu and Qin Xingyan finished their breakfast absent-mindedly, Qin Xingyan and Su Shenxing went out together. Emily tilted her head without any sense of nervousness. Then she planned to go back to her room and play Super Mario Odyssey on NS that she borrowed, magic, from the Earth God. However, before she could leave, Song Yu grabbed both of her shoulders. Although Emily could break free because she did not feel any malice, she just curiously turned her head and looked at Song Yu, who had a bad expression on her face. "Hey little Emily, aren't you curious about the itinerary after caution?" She tried to squeeze out a smile on her face and asked Emily. It seemed that she wanted to rope in an ally. Emily shook her head. He did not want to do anything right now. She just wanted to play games. "Little Emily, do you know that a fruit-scented roast duck restaurant opened in the south of the city recently? I heard that the sliced duck business is so good that it's sold out every day." Song Yu immediately changed the direction of her persuasion. For the landlord's physical and mental health, I have to observe him occasionally. Big breast. Sister Song Yu, are you interested in being my assistant? My pleasure. Chapter 549. Xingyan, didn't you come out to buy something? After walking on the bustling commercial street for a long time, Su Shenxing noticed that Qin Xingyan seemed to be wandering around aimlessly, so he couldn't help but ask. "No, I just want to go shopping with you today." The girl showed a gentle smile and replied softly, "Because I suddenly realized that I've never gone shopping with you before." Su Shenxing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Qin Xingyan was different from before. It didn't mean that she was possessed or anything else. It was just that the girl's temperament had changed and she had become more mature than before. Could it be that Senior is tired of it? "You don't want to come out with me?" Then her expression became a little sad and she asked softly. Although Su Shenxing knew that the girl was probably just pretending to be pitiful, he still felt sorry for her when she looked like she was about to cry. More importantly, there seemed to be a lot of passers-by, mainly men, around them who stopped because of the girl's expression and cast piercing glances at him, who seemed to be a heartbreaker. "Anyway, I don't have anything to do today. It doesn't matter if I accompany you all day." So Su Shenxing could only sigh, and the girl put away her sad expression and showed a bright smile. How should he put it? The moment he saw her beautiful smile, Su Shenxing actually had the feeling that it was worth running around with her all day for this smile. However, he quickly shook off this thought and continued to follow behind the happy girl. Su Shenxing didn't know what it was like for other men to go shopping with girls, but Qin Xingyan didn't seem to be interested in clothes and cosmetics. She only stopped to look at some interesting gadgets occasionally. Most of the time she just chatted with Su Shenxing and listened to his words. The sun shone through the canopy of the sycamore trees on both sides of the commercial street, sprinkling light on the street where the two strolled. There's actually such a thing on this street. Su Shenxing was slightly surprised when they passed by the game center named XX Animation City. Didn't you go to the game center when you were a child? Qin Xingyan asked curiously. I heard that boys like this kind of shop very much. Because my family was very poor from the beginning, Su Xinxing said with a bitter smile. It's very difficult to survive with only my father's intermittent living expenses. How could I come to this kind of place to play? Well, since that's the case, let's go in and take a look. The girl pulled Su Xinxing's arm and dragged Su Xinxing in. Senior, don't worry, it's my treat today. Since you said that. In fact, Su Xinxing, who was also a little curious, finally gave up resisting. After exiting the game center, the two began to play inside. The first was the claw machine. Isn't this clamp too loose? I can't pick it up at all. Su Xinxing, who lost several coins in a row, frowned. He suppressed the urge to slap the machine and complained, even if you catch it, it will fall off as long as there's a little impact. It's impossible to catch it at all. This kind of machine is already like this. If you want to catch it, you need a trick. As she spoke, the girl demonstrated and successfully pinched out a domestic minion doll that looked like a bean pod. Why are you so skilled? How many times have you done this? Su Xinxing looked at Qin Xingyan in surprise. She had succeeded on her first try. Because when I first came down the mountain, I was very curious about everything. Plus, the Bailu Temple's living allowance is a lot, so I usually can't spend it all. So, I secretly played with this claw machine many times. The girl smiled mischievously and winked at Su Xinxing. Remember to keep it a secret from my teacher. How should I say? I still wanted to continue playing. Su Xinxing picked up the deformed doll and scrutinized it for a moment, but when I saw that the prize was this thing, I suddenly lost my motivation. You want to enjoy the process, Qin Xingyan said with a smile. Then he pulled Su Xinxing to another place. Although that's what you say, there are actually a lot of fun things in this game. For example, Resident Evil 6. What's with this knockoff name? How can it be a 6? Discovering this kind of strange game is also one of the inspirations of the trip to the game center. I say there are really people who would spend money on such a strange game. Although old Su complained verbally, his curiosity was piqued. In the end, he spent a few coins to play the two-player mode with Qin Xingyan and successfully cleared the level. Unlike the claw machine, which required proficiency, this kind of game relied purely on reaction speed and certain controls, or backboard. For Su Xinxing, it was not too difficult because the boss's movements were like slow motion in his eyes. He had plenty of time to react. It was far worse than a real monster. After playing for a while, the two of them had accumulated a lot of game tickets. This was similar to most of the game halls in China. Game tickets could be obtained by playing the game, and the game tickets could be exchanged for prizes at the counter. If there was a difference, it was probably due to the fact that the game center was located in a bustling commercial street. There were many interesting and rather expensive items on the exchange list as prizes. The money that Su Xinxing spent, while it was mainly Qin Xingyan's money, was actually not a lot. However, because they were able to rely on their superhuman reaction speed and physical fitness to score quite high in many games, it even caused the customers in the game center to put down the game in their hands and watch them play as if they were performing a cool game. Therefore, the game tickets that Su Xinxing obtained were quite a lot. They were hung around Su Xinxing's body a few times. As for prizes, I recommend the smart cleaning robot or the new tablet computer from Pear. If Senior isn't interested in those, a travel voucher or something like that would be good too. If you are interested in home video game consoles, you can also consider the console packages from Nintendo and Nisso. Emily will definitely be very happy. While Su Xinxing was still browsing through the exchange list, the girl had already made a suggestion. Is that so? Su Xinxing scanned the list back and forth a few times and finally came to his own conclusion. Please give this to me. He pointed at the list and said to the waiter. A moment later, the waiter presented the item he asked for. It was a small hairpin. The material itself was ordinary silver. The cost was not too high, but the core part was made of a few broken diamonds. If it was placed in a jewelry store, it would probably cost close to 5 digits to buy. This is for you. After receiving the hairpin, Su Xinxing handed it to Qin Xingyan. I had a lot of fun today. This is a gift in return. Well, it's more like a gift from someone else. If you like it, that would be great. Su Xinxing scratched his face and said somewhat embarrassedly. He will definitely cherish it. The girl took the hairpin and carefully held it to her chest with both hands. Even if the world turns upside down and the rivers and seas flow backwards, I won't let it suffer the slightest bit of harm. The girl trembled slightly and hid her tears of joy in her hair. Her face was filled with a blush that could make people melt. That's too much. Su Xinxing complained helplessly, and it's already noon, let's go eat. Qin Xingyan said with a voice full of energy, Senior, just tell me what you want to eat, of course it's still my treat. Why do I feel like I'm living off a woman? Chapter 550. Oh, no matter how you look at it, it's still a date. On the commercial street, Song Yu hid behind a lamppost and looked at the two people talking and laughing not too far away. Her face was full of unwillingness. To be honest, this kind of clumsy concealment that looked like something out of a comedy movie was completely useless. If it wasn't for the fact that Emily had set up a barrier to reduce their presence, they would have been discovered by the two people in front of them a long time ago. Ah, they've entered the gaming center. Molly, let's follow them. Thus, the two people sneakily followed them. Because of Emily's interest, Song Yu exchanged some game coins for the little guy to play by himself, while she continued to secretly observe Su Xinxing and the others. They actually have this trick up their sleeve. I also want to play games intimately with Xinxing. Seeing the two people squeezed in front of the same screen to play the cooperative game Resident Evil 6, and occasionally looking at each other and smiling because of their tacit understanding, Song Yu's unwillingness grew even stronger. It was as if a dark cloud had appeared above her head. Compared to a resentful woman, she was only lacking a handkerchief to bite. While she was lost in thought, Emily was alone behind her playing the stage jump game. A series of perfect scores were constantly being refreshed on the screen. If it wasn't for the fact that no one was paying attention to them due to their presence being reduced, the scene of the dancing blonde loli with two ponytails continuously updating the highest score in the game would probably attract more spectators than Su Xinxing and the others. He even gave her a token of love. In the end, when Su Xinxing gave the broken diamond hair accessory to Qin Xingyan at the counter, Song Yu's whole body finally went OTZ. Her whole body turned gray as if she had been burned out. My final advantage is, Emily also went OTZ with her. Two cartoonish teardrops hung from the corners of the little guy's eyes, and his golden ponytails drooped powerlessly to the ground like his master. He pouted and muttered to himself in a fit of pique, my game console. Although it was very strange for two beautiful girls, one big and one small, to bend forward in frustration, it was also unexpectedly pleasing to the eye. It was a pity that no one noticed. Lunchtime. Although it was Qin Xingyan's treat, Su Xinxing was not the kind of person who would shamelessly eat a big meal just because of other people's situation. In the end, he just randomly chose a rice noodle shop to solve the problem of lunch. Su Xinxing, who did not care about his table manners, ate like a whirlwind. Qin Xingyan, who had become a celestial, did not need to eat to fill his stomach. He stopped eating after tasting the food for a while. Therefore, the two quickly finished eating and began their afternoon date. They're starting to move again. Emily, we need to catch up. Because the enemy's situation this morning was too big, Song Yu, who didn't have much of an appetite, didn't eat much. On the other hand, Emily recovered quickly. Now there were 3 empty bowls on the table. Tell me if you haven't finished eating. Jasmine, hurry up and think about that game console that you missed so much. Also, do you know? The fruit-scented roast duck goes well with the duck rack soup. I've recently learned how to make the delicious duck rack soup. Leave it to me. Thus, the little guy immediately made a solemn vow and patted his chest that did not move up and down and said confidently. With the little girl's help, they once again caught up with the two people. Perhaps because Su Xinxing and Qin Xingyan did not have the talent and experience for dating, the afternoon was still the same as before. However, compared to Su Xinxing's boredom in the morning and Qin Xingyan's restraint in the afternoon, the two seemed to be more harmonious in the afternoon. For example, Qin Xingyan could already take Su Xinxing to some small jewelry stores with more young women without any scruples. It would be great if we could hear what they're saying. Molly, do you have any ideas? Wait, you can't eat that. By the time Song Yu took the saliva-stained perfume from Mo Li's mouth, Su Xinxing and Qin Xingyan had already left the store. In the end, Song Yu had to spend money to buy the bottle of orange-scented perfume so that she could continue to follow Su Xinxing with Mo Li. Are you worried that the landlord will be taken away? After continuing to follow for more than half an hour, Mo Li finally seemed to be a little bored and suddenly asked Song Yu. Song Yu originally wanted to deny it out of modesty as an Asian woman, but she remained silent without saying anything. That girl Xingyan clearly said before that she wouldn't do such a thing deliberately. After a while she slowly said, when I confessed to Xinxing she didn't show any extreme reaction. So, for her to suddenly do such a thing, if you want to say that she's unwilling. Don't look at me like that. I admit that I'm extremely unwilling. But more than that, I'm still a little worried about her current situation. If that's the case, can't you just ask her directly? Emily asked again. Sometimes I really envy you, Emily. You don't have anything to worry about and you're always so straightforward. Emily, you're so good at knocking. I feel like you're infringing on my rights in some way, Song Yu ridiculed. She then revealed a determined smile. But you're right. Maybe it's time to clarify things with her face to face. Ugh, that's why I said don't look at me like that. I admit that I also want to mess up their date. The meeting went unexpectedly smoothly. Emily slightly removed a portion of the existence-weakening barrier, and Song Yu personally made an inviting gesture to Qin Xingyan. After a moment, Qin Xingyan used some kind of excuse to get Su Xinxing to sit on a bench on the side of the street, while he ran into the alley to meet up with Song Yu. Song Yu Sr., why are you and Emily here? Although I really want to ask, I'm pretty sure you've been following us since the beginning, right? The girl sighed. Since you've guessed it, I won't hide anymore. Song Yu immediately went straight to the point. I want to know what happened. You weren't such a proactive person in the past, were you? If I have to say something, it's that my mentality has changed a little. Qin Xingyan was silent for a moment, then slowly said, did you know I almost died yesterday? Because Song Yu was still a normal person, she didn't know what happened yesterday. I originally thought that I could disregard life and death. If I could die for Senior, I would die without regrets. Qin Xingyan said with a bitter smile, but when death really came in front of me, I realized that I was actually so timid, and that I still had so many attachments to this world. Song Yu was silent and quietly listened to him continue. At that moment, I missed the little sparrow I saw when I was a child. I felt guilty for not being able to make any decent contributions to the sect. I also thought of the few friends I had at school. Senior's delicious dishes. At that moment, I thought of a lot of things, and even the little things I usually had became precious. But there's only one thing I regret the most. Why couldn't I muster up the courage like you and work hard to take a step forward, and become an important person to Senior? Qin Xingyan's smile showed a hint of self-mockery. It wasn't until then that I realized that I was actually such a greedy and despicable person. Even though I always kept telling myself that as long as I stayed by Senior's side no matter what, it didn't matter, but at that moment, I took off all the pretense and saw my true feelings. I want to be the most important person to Senior, and I don't want to share Senior's heart with anyone else. If one day I can become the mistress of Sakura Apartments as a family member instead of a tenant, that should be the happiest thing in my life. It's because I understand all of this that I'm completely different from yesterday. To be honest, Song Yu sighed, if it were any other girl I would probably think that she watched too many romance movies and was too hypocritical. I'm sorry. Qin Xingyan was at a loss as to what to do and apologized. But I know very well that your words are sincere. Then Song Yu took a deep breath. I understand. Your Excellency's declaration of war, I've received it. A smile full of confidence appeared on her face. Senior. Qin Xingyan seemed to be a little confused. I'll say in advance that I won't back down. I've known for a long time that my only enemy is you. So let's fight fair and square and use all our strength to fight to our heart's content. Although I'm not as helpful as you in terms of supernatural abilities to that guy, I'm still confident in my female strength. The spoils of war have already been decided, haven't they? Facing Song Yu's outstretched hand, Qin Xingyan hesitated for a moment. Then the confusion on her face disappeared, and a faint blush appeared on the girl's face and an intoxicating smile appeared on her face. Yes. She held Song Yu's hand tightly. Okay, I can't lose to you in the first round. I'll let you have the morning, then leave the afternoon to me. Too much. Today is clearly my date with Senior. But when they ran out of the alley they were dumbfounded. Su Xinxing was nowhere to be seen on the bench. How should I put it? If it was another guy I'd probably think he stood me up. For some reason Qin Xingyan sighed. But if it was Senior, yes, he's probably involved in something strange again. Song Yu had a similar complicated expression. Then their eyes converged on Emily, who was not far away from them buying pastries. Emily turned around and found that the two of them were staring at her strangely. She recalled that Su Xinxing had once taught her how to deal with various situations when she encountered them. So she held the bag full of pastries in her left hand, curled her right hand into a cat's claw, and her blonde hair also stood up with two pointed cat ears under her control. The little girl herself was expressionless and cute. Meow, Senior, I'm suddenly very worried about Senior's teaching methods. What a coincidence, me too. In the end, Qin Xingyan and Song Yu reached a consensus on this strange matter. Go ahead. Emily tilted her head in confusion, and her face also showed a cute puzzled expression. Chapter 551. Qin Xingyan's guess was correct, because Su Xinxing was indeed involved in trouble. When Qin Xingyan left, she used the excuse of going to the toilet. Although old Su knew that this girl didn't need to go to the toilet, which ancient book would record that immortals needed to go to the toilet, this didn't stop him from understanding that she had something to do. And in the end, although Emily's magic was effective on him, he could vaguely sense that something was wrong. So in the end, Su Xinxing didn't stop the other party. He just muttered, I feel like I'm going to be known as a freeloader. While eating Qin Xingyan's barbecue skewers, he waited for the other party by the roadside. Logically speaking, for most male compatriots, barbecue skewers were usually a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. Plus, old Su was a bit of a clean freak, so after eating the barbecue skewers he looked around for a long time before he found a small alley with a few green moving trash cans. So he went to the alley to throw the bamboo skewers. If it was before, he only needed to throw the skewers from outside the alley. But recently he had lost control of his strength. It would be bad if the skewers broke through the trash cans, the floor tiles, and the foundation of the building next to it. But at this moment something fell from the sky. At first Su Xinxing subconsciously thought that it was a cloud falling down, but then he realized that what he saw was a fluttering white skirt. Su Xinxing even caught a glimpse of a piece of pure white cotton triangular cloth in the soft cloud-like hemline of the dress. Then the person fell to the ground with a thud. Ouch, ouch, ouch. I thought you would definitely catch me. Sure enough, the behavior of the divergent is completely unpredictable. The other party rubbed his buttocks and showed a teary expression. No, except for the male protagonists in light novels, under normal circumstances, no one would catch a person falling from the sky, right? From a more malicious perspective, wouldn't the first reaction when seeing someone jumping off a building be to run away first to prevent the other party from falling on their buttocks? Although for Su Xinxing, even if a piece of meteorite fell on him, he wouldn't be the one injured in the end. The one who fell from the sky was a girl. She had a head of long snow-white hair that Su Xinxing often saw in the other world. It was not the gorgeous silver hair that Su Xinxing often saw. Instead, it was pure white hair that did not have a trace of impurities, like that of an old person. If she was an ordinary woman, she wouldn't look good with a head full of frost, because this kind of hair color wouldn't match her young face. But for some reason the young girl, at least she looked like a young girl, didn't have that kind of incongruous feeling. Instead she gave off a delicate beauty, but for some reason she kept her eyes closed. However, Su Xinxing heard something else from the other party's words. Anomaly. He narrowed his eyes and repeated the part of the girl's words that caught his attention. Back in Kunlun, that was what Bai Zhe had called the world fragment he had found. Haven't you noticed? Why is it that the 2 times you've met that legendary monster, the only thing it said to you was specious? Why does it have an almost omniscient ability, but it doesn't tell you the whereabouts of the thing it's currently looking for? Su Xinxing's mutterings were without rhyme or reason, but the young girl seemed to know what he meant. She raised her head slightly, looked in Su Xinxing's direction and said everything like she was spilling beans. After hearing what she said, Su Xinxing realized that Bai Zhe's attitude towards him was indeed a bit strange. The first time it was okay, at least it gave Su Xinxing the Haotian mirror that he used to travel through time. The second time it was no different from a charlatan. The reason is very simple, because for her, no, it should be for all the diviners and prophets in this world, you are the biggest anomaly in the world. The girl, who still didn't open her eyes, said slowly, Who are you? Probably because the other party showed a very familiar look towards him. Until now, Su Xinxing realized that he didn't know the other party at all. Just call me the legendary girl, eh? The other party said proudly for some reason. What the hell? Su Xinxing complained with an embarrassed face. Because if I tell you my real name, Doesn't it mean that I may also become a happy member of the Savior's harem? What the hell is that mysterious group that makes people full of the desire to complain? While talking, Su Shinxing found that the girl had unknowingly opened her eyes. Just like her hair and dress, her eyes were also white. However, that kind of white was not only different from the white of the eyes, but also different from the slightly uncomfortable white of cataracts. The girl's pupils seemed to have an indescribable dense air flowing slowly. Not only was it not ugly, but it also had a kind of extraordinarily deep and lively feeling. However, Su Shinxing keenly noticed that the other party's eyes seemed to be unfocused, and he couldn't feel her line of sight. Your eyes. Oh, I'm a blind person, the girl said happily. Your tone is too cheerful, I can't feel a trace of sympathy at all. Because I don't want to be pitied. Oh no. At this point, the girl's face suddenly showed an expression of something bad. She grabbed Su Shinxing's hand. Her accurate and capable movements made it impossible for people to believe that she was blind. Anyway, it's not easy to escape from the room, let's run away first. What the hell are you doing? What kind of development is this? While talking, Su Shinxing also found that it seemed that some people were rushing towards the alley, but he didn't feel any hostility from those people. Instead, they were full of anxiety and panic. It seemed that the girl was not kidnapped, but was close to the feeling of a rich family's daughter on a trip. It's not easy to get a chance to come out and bask in the sun. I don't want to be disturbed by those big idiots. The other party said righteously. So what does this have to do with me? Su Shinxing asked in astonishment. I know what you're looking for and I also know where it is. If you can help me get through this difficulty, I'll tell you where it is. The other party said with a sly smile as she pulled Su Shinxing's hand forward. I feel like I've been dragged around all day. Wait, at least let me send a text to Xingyan. Because the other party was afraid of hurting the delicate-looking girl, our protagonist was dragged out of the alley before he could finish his sentence. Chapter 552. Originally, Su Shinxing thought that his hesitation at the beginning would give the girl's bodyguards a chance to catch them. Although it was useless except for giving old Su a face-slapping plot that could be used for 1 or 2 chapters. However, after being pulled by the girl for a while, the breath of the bodyguards disappeared. He didn't know if they had been shaken off. Phew. I can't run anymore. Sister, we have only run less than a kilometer. That's because I used to be locked up in the basement all by myself. The most exercise I did was just eating with chopsticks in my hand. Instead of saying that you are a lady, you are more like a sex prisoner, right? Su Shinxing complained. You just wanted to say beep slave, right? It's beep, right? The girl's cheeks suddenly puffed up like a roasted rice cake, and she lost her temper without any deterrence. A girl shouldn't say that kind of word on the street. Su Shinxing, whose scalp was numb by the stares of the surrounding onlookers, said helplessly, Anyway, I can't run anymore and I'm going to die. Tomorrow I will definitely have muscle pain because of the exercise. Just how weak are you? Su Shinxing sighed. Do you want me to carry you? Men and women should not touch each other. Only at this time your self-esteem is bursting. Su Shinxing muttered in his heart. It was you who took the initiative to hold my hand. I hope my prince can pick me up on a colorful auspicious cloud. The girl sat down on the bench on the side of the road and said exhausted. You are asking for too much. Su Shinxing thought for a while and found that none of the supermen around him could raise a colorful auspicious cloud. The only one who was somewhat close to it, Brother Long, could only raise a rain cloud. If you really can't do it, a bicycle will do. It dropped so low all of a sudden. Su Shinxing complained. Although he didn't even have a bicycle. By the way, no one is chasing you now. Can you tell me what you said before? Of course not. With her hands on her hips, the girl looked at the lamppost next to Su Shinxing with unfocused eyes and refused without hesitation. You see, if what happened between us is considered as a novel, then from the time we met until now, I'm afraid it's less than 2,000 words, right? What does this have to do with me? Su Shinxing said in his heart. You must be thinking, F*ck, this B*Tish is talking about a F*king relationship with me, right? Young girl, your inner drama is too rich. Su Shinxing refused to admit that the other party had guessed 80% of the content. All in all, because our communication process is too short, if I tell you all the important information at once, wouldn't I become a strange character who doesn't know anything? The girl continued to speak confidently to the fire hydrant next to the lamp post. Because this scene was too funny, Su Shinxing even began to wonder if this guy was deliberately doing something funny. No. Actually, I think you're already confused enough. Is that so? Before I snuck out this time, I did some research on the trending slogans on the internet. The other party revealed a shocked expression. I don't think this has anything to do with slogans. Hey Gigi, what are you talking about? Don't tell me you also know how to surf the internet? What a coincidence, I'm also a slogan. Hey, what era did you research on slogans from? Heavenly Kingdom's Jasmine, your landlord, seemed to be stuck by something strange. Whether it's the fragmented cherry blossoms dancing in the night sky like fine snow, or the moon in the night sky that wants to speak but hesitates, please come and fulfill my wish. In the karaoke room, Su Shinxing looked like he had nothing left to live for as he slapped the tambourine on the sofa, while the girl held the microphone and sang in high spirits. To be honest, the girl's voice was very good. Although it was a bit sharp, it was as clean and clear as a clear spring. Plus, she wasn't the type of person who could sing out of tune from the Mariana Trench to Mount Everest, so her voice was quite good. Unfortunately, old Su's musical ability was average, so he couldn't hear anything. Plus, this small room was extremely noisy and he paid for the room, which made his mood even worse. Previously, he took out his phone and wanted to send a message to Qin Xingyan, who he stood up. But when he came out, he realized that his phone had run out of battery. Thus, he could only patiently accompany the legendary girl while praying that Qin Xingyan wouldn't cause any trouble because he couldn't find him. This possibility was quite low because, in a sense, Qin Xingyan could be considered as the last conscience of Sakura apartment. La 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 la. When Su Shinxing came back to his senses, he realized that the other party was no longer singing the lyrics, but had changed to la 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 la. Is it really okay to be so perfunctory? You were the one who wanted to sing. Because I forgot the lyrics. How can you say that so confidently? Aren't there lyrics on the screen? Because I'm blind. The girl turned around, held the microphone in her left hand, and made a Kira gesture with her right hand. Unfortunately, because the angle wasn't right, this flirtatious look was thrown directly at the jukebox next to Su Shinxing, who had a determined face the whole time. Is that really the case? Su Shinxing raised his eyebrows suspiciously. To be honest, although the girl's eyes were indeed out of focus, and it felt like she wasn't using her visual function from her every move, except for the occasional stupidity, she was no different from a normal person most of the time. That's right. I can live like a normal person because I can feel things that are more real. The girl wasn't angry at Su Shinxing's suspicions. Instead, she explained with a smile, "After all, I've been used to it since I was young. It doesn't matter even if I can't see things now." Speaking of this, she also stretched out her right hand and made a V gesture to Su Shinxing, who was drinking water, and said, "Well, because of this, I have a bounty on the Darknet's black market. If you can kidnap me, you can get 200 million. And it's in US dollars. Even if it's just a corpse, it's still 50 million. Suddenly, Su Shinxing spat out the water. No wonder she was locked in the basement. Generally, if someone had a treasure worth 200 million, they would definitely put it in a safe place like the basement for safekeeping. At this time, someone knocked on the door of the private room. Oh, the snacks I ordered are here." The girl happily ran to the door. "Hey, when did you order something to eat?" "When you weren't looking." The girl happily opened the door. But what appeared in front of her was a black muzzle. Chapter 553. Before the girl realized that the person in front of her was not a waiter, the person in the waiter's uniform had already pulled the trigger. The bullet shot at the girl, who was caught off guard at a speed faster than the speed of sound. However, almost at the next moment, the bullet suddenly stopped in midair, going from a high speed to a standstill. Then it shot back into the barrel of the pistol at 3 times the speed. Because the whole process was less than 0.1 seconds, neither the girl nor the assassin could react at all. Then, almost as if it was a matter of course, the pistol's barrel exploded just like that. The assassin was blasted into a bloody mess, covered in blood and half dead as he leaned against the corridor wall, and then slowly slid to the ground. Oh. Obviously she was being assassinated, but the girl's face was full of surprise. She turned her head, dense air swirling in her eyes. "Is that the ward? You can see it?" This time it was Su Shinxing's turn to be a little surprised. Yes, after all, the enemy this time was a fragile human. Because he did not want to see too much of a strange death, Su Shinxing did not intend to do it himself. But just at the moment when the assassin pulled the trigger, he cast a ward of retaliation on the girl. It was a defensive ward that could double the enemy's attack. Su Shinxing used this ward to play rebound, rebound, rebound again, rebound your rebound with a demon king in a certain lattice world who was proficient in rebounding magic. It was a battle routine that was like a primary school quarrel. I can't see it at all, the girl said proudly for some reason. Because I'm blind. Is that something to be proud of? But the girl lowered her eyes, her long eyelashes casting dense shadows on her fair face under the dim ceiling light of the cave. It's vaguely understandable. In order to obtain this power that surpasses common sense, the girl's eyes were clearly unfocused, but Su Shinxing had a feeling that she was looking at him. She said softly, "What price did you pay?" Su Shinxing fell into a rare silence. After a long time he said, "If you don't call the ambulance, that guy will die. So you care about the life and death of a mere human? You don't show any mercy when killing monsters? Monsters have no human rights," Su Shinxing said firmly. To be honest, he did not care about the life and death of the assassin, but if someone died in such a lively place, it would be more or less troublesome to suppress the matter. Monsters were different. If Xiao Jingyi was still here, then the best choice would be to hand the assassin over to him. But the problem was that the guy was still lying in a hospital bed. Although a lot of things had happened according to the normal timeline, only a day had passed since Su Shinxing went to see him. Even if Xiao Jingyi's body recovered faster than normal people because he bathed in more spiritual energy, he did not have the blood of the Nami star. If he wanted to completely recover, he would need to recuperate for a period of time. Besides him, Su Shinxing did not know anyone else in the Jiangjin police station. Just as he was still distressed, an acquaintance appeared at the corner of the corridor. "Long time no see, Mr. Su." The other person nodded slightly to show respect. "Let me handle this guy. From the meaning of your name, you are also Mr. Su, right?" Su Shinxing sighed. "Didn't you get promoted to Tianjing? Why did you come back to Jiangjin?" The person who came was naturally the former director of Jiangjin's super administrative office, Su Feng. Of course, it's because there was a big mess in Jiangjin. Even that brat Xiao Jingyi was hospitalized. I had no choice but to come over and replace him. Su Feng sighed. "The other reason is the guy in front of you." Sure enough, it's not that easy to escape from the hands of the mechanism." The legendary girl A had a serious expression. She took out a phone and placed it next to her ear. Using a very soft voice that Su Shinxing and Su Feng could clearly hear, she said, Hey, that's right, it's me. I'm being monitored by the mechanism, but it doesn't matter. Now we're going to execute the third backup plan. I wish you all good luck. I'll Sai Congro." My phone, when did you take it?" Su Shinxing frowned and said, "Also, it ran out of battery a long time ago. Why did you call?" "Great Master Yun, please don't do this kind of strange childish action again. The officials at the Imperial Astronomers' headquarters are already unhappy with your previous behavior of running away. They even issued a letter of accountability," Su Feng said to the girl with a wry smile. The girl threw the phone back to Su Shinxing. Then she pulled the corner of her mouth and made a face at Su Feng. Although Su Shinxing could only see the girl's back because of the angle and couldn't see the face, from Su Feng's mixed helpless smile and voice that made people want to beat him up, he knew that the face was definitely very interesting. "If you're with Mr. Su, then I can reluctantly accept the security. Considering that you really haven't come out for a breath of fresh air in a long time, it's fine to let you play for a while. But please don't forget your identity. At night I'll come and pick you up." In the end, the confrontation between the two ended with Su Feng's concession. "The password is 123456. The rest of the money will be Mr. Su's reward." He put a bank card on the table and then waved his hand. A few men dressed like super black special police came out from the shadows and carried the assassin away. And Su Feng also saluted the girl and left in big strides. "What did you say, you'll pick me up when it's dark? Isn't it already dinner time?" The girl said angrily. "Isn't that good?" Su Shinxing had an indifferent expression. He picked up the bank card. "After dinner, remember to tell me everything I want to know." Wow, is this how you treat the beautiful girl who accompanied you the whole afternoon so coldly? I'm just coldly treating the guy who wasted my afternoon. Damn it, I want to go to the top floor of Jiangjin's fashion building for a luxurious meal. Do you know? There's a saying in this world called the experts among the people. Su Shinxing seriously suggested, so why don't we go eat at a food stall? I know a place that has a really good food stall. Jiangjin's fashion building. Although it was called a building, it was actually a tower-shaped building that imitated the Oriental Pearl Tower. Although it couldn't be compared to the real thing, the entire building was about 300 meters tall. In addition, it had a very fashionable appearance, so it had vaguely become one of Jiangjin's landmarks. The most fascinating place was the luxurious restaurant at the top of the fashion building. It was said that the lowest cost there was 5 figures. It was definitely not an exaggeration to say that a single meal would cost a normal person a month's salary. However, such a high price still couldn't stop people's footsteps. After all, this era didn't lack rich people and people who wanted to pretend to be rich. In addition, there was a metaphysical saying that the success rate of eating here with a blind date is higher, which caused a lot of couples and prospective couples to flood in. Are you kidding me? Boiled cabbage actually costs a few hundred yuan? You must be kidding me. When he saw the menu, Su Shinxing was shocked. Usually he was the one who reshaped other people's worldview, but today his worldview was on the verge of collapse. A dish that cost more than 2,000 yuan, and it was seafood, was far beyond his common sense. That's the famous Sichuan dish, boiled cabbage. The girl pretended to look at the menu and complained in a low voice. I don't believe that this thing is much better than boiled mandrake. Isn't mandrake poison? The girl muttered. No, I mean the kind that grows into a human shape and cries when pulled out of the ground. Nonsense, this snail is more expensive than the meat of a rainbow dragon. Because it's a famous French dish. Wait, dragon meat? Oh my god, the price of foie gras can buy a lot of geese. The more Su Shinxing looked at him, the more he felt that he was not suitable to come to such a place. Fortunately, he also knew that it was not a good thing for him to act like a country bumpkin, so he spoke softly. Otherwise, he would have attracted the attention of the surrounding people. Even the waiter who helped them order could not help but show a look of disdain on his face. However, when the French dishes were served, Su Shinxing's etiquette became very authentic. Without considering his t-shirt and beach pants, he looked like a noble who was eating elegantly. After all, many of the worlds that old Su had transmigrated to were more fantasy worlds, where the Western noble's etiquette, or something similar, was not out of date. Plus, as a hero, it was normal for him to participate in some grand royal ceremonies. Over time he became familiar with such etiquette. It was just that he usually did not use it. Therefore the waiter, who was full of disdain, was so surprised that his jaw almost dropped. This is the first time I've spent 5 figures on a meal. After dinner, Su Shinxing still had a look of lingering fear. If Su Feng did not leave behind a bank card with 100,000 yuan in it before he left, he would have to think about how to wash away his image of a dine and dash. The ingredients in this restaurant are just so. The girl pursed her lips and seemed to be a little dissatisfied as she commented. To this, Su Shinxing just rolled his eyes. After dinner, the two took the sightseeing elevator to the top of the Jiangjin fashion building, which was a spherical structure. This was actually a place equivalent to a lookout. From here one could almost overlook the entire Jiangjin. At this time, other than Su Shinxing and his group, there were also a few people who seemed to be lovers gathered together in 2s and 3s. Although Su Shinxing used to overlook Jiangjin's city from other buildings when he was in the military, compared to here, it was clear that the shock from those places was much weaker. The sky had completely darkened, and the bright moon in the east was hanging in the pitch-black night sky. Only a few sparse stars accompanied it in the night sky. Instead, it was replaced by the bright river on the ground that flowed endlessly. Aren't you blind? Su Shinxing looked at the girl whose entire face was almost stuck to the glass and laughed. But I can use my heart to see. Or rather, the scene that I can see is definitely more beautiful than what you can see. A faint smile appeared on the girl's face. It was completely different from her crazy appearance all day, and it made people's hearts beat faster. Is that so? Of course. I can see the process of this city gradually changing from a small fishing village to what it is now. Many fascinating stories happened one after another on this land, like bamboo shoots after the rain. They overcame one difficulty after another and thrived, and finally became the lush bamboo forest called Jiangjin. the girl said softly. Although there was sadness, disappointment, pain, and chaos, it is because we have overcome all of this that we can now see such a beautiful scene. Speaking up to hear, she suddenly stopped and a lonely expression appeared on her face. The next moment, the special glass that the girl was leaning on was suddenly full of cracks, and then it exploded into countless small glass shards that wouldn't hurt people because of special treatment. And because the glass that supported most of the weight of the girl's body collapsed, her body involuntarily leaned forward, and she fell out of the watchtower from a height of more than 300 meters into the night sky. It was a substitute attack. No, it was a terrorist attack. Su Shenxing didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the girl seemed to have a relieved expression before she fell out. But he didn't have time to think too much. He took 3 steps and 2 jumped out of the gap and chased after the girl. Galileo once told us that under the same external conditions, the acceleration of 2 objects falling from the same height would be the same regardless of their weight. So in theory, Su Shenxing couldn't catch up with the girl. Although there was also the option of increasing speed by changing his movements to reduce air resistance. Su Shenxing wouldn't be Su Shenxing if he was bound by the mere laws of physics. He gathered cloud scales behind his back and then suddenly burst out, causing his falling speed to increase by several times. So he finally caught up with the girl and hugged her in his arms. Ah, how delightful. The situation was obviously urgent, but the girl in his arms still had time to smile. She said, "Finally, I guessed correctly for once, Mr. Anomaly." After the girl's protectors found out that she was using Su Shenxing's tiger skin, even if the girl herself was important, countless situations in the past had proven to them that Su Shenxing was a person who could be persuaded by reason but not by force. If they dared to use force against Su Shenxing, the next moment, the imperial astronomer under the jurisdiction of the Super Administrative Office would probably turn from a mysterious organization of national power into a brand of fresh meat mooncakes. If it was an ordinary man, he would most likely be tied up and dragged into a van by a group of mysterious men in black to be brainwashed a few seconds after meeting the girl. If he was unlucky, he might even forget some other things such as his sexual orientation and so on. In the face of such a situation, the enemy still dared to assassinate the girl. Judging from their thorough preparation, even if the girl didn't run away from home, they would have done everything they could to kill her in Jiangjin. It could be said that they had already thrown caution to the wind and didn't plan to leave Jiangjin alive. Unfortunately, that's not right, the girl giggled. She wasn't worried that she had a brush with death. Perhaps she also felt that even if the Grim Reaper really came looking for her, she was afraid that the young man beside her would mercilessly strip off her black cloak, snatch away her scythe, and make her into a bone specimen to sell to the school or something. With a heavy thud, Su Shenxing, who had changed his posture into a princess carry, finally landed on the ground successfully. The surrounding cement floor was directly smashed into a crater full of cracks by this huge force. And when this impact was fed back to Su Shenxing's body, it was absorbed by his cloud scale. Otherwise, even if the girl didn't die from the shock, she would have suffered a concussion or something. My ability is clairvoyance. The girl seemed to have not noticed Su Shenxing's behavior at all. Her arms hooked around Su Shenxing's neck as she spoke with a sweet smile. Unexpectedly, you're so low. Su Shenxing began to wonder if this girl had a sister called Clairaudient. Although she's not my sister, Clairaudient does exist. She really does exist. Su Shenxing first subconsciously ridiculed, but then he frowned. He didn't seem to have subconsciously said Clairaudient just now. This is the power of clairvoyance. I can seek a lot of information that can't be seen with the naked eye. The only uncomfortable thing is that this ability isn't completely controllable. Although I can now use this power to see some specific things, such as some technical information that the higher-ups want to know. Let me tell you, I've participated in the research and development of a lot of black technology in the Celestial Empire in the past 10 years. But more often than not, it will give me a lot of messy things which gives me a headache. Oh. What kind of reaction is this? You're too cold. The girl reached out and pinched Su Shenxing's face. Hey, you actually have stubble. Your focus is really strange. Su Shenxing raised his head and avoided the girl's mischievous hand. Compared to this, why didn't those killers continue to attack when we didn't move? They've been caught by the secret forces of the Imperial astronomer. The girl said proudly. Do you think they won't notice with such a big commotion? That's true. It's fine if it's the general police, but a special force like this shouldn't be late every time. When Su Xinxing thought of this, the girl had already struggled out of his hand and jumped to the ground. Today is about to end. The girl's face showed a somewhat lonely smile. She stretched out her hands behind her back and ran a few steps forward. I'm going to become the princess of the tower again. Su Xinxing thought about it, but still didn't know if he should comfort the other party. Don't worry, I'm very trustworthy. Not knowing if she misunderstood Su Xinxing's silence, the girl turned around. The colorful neon lights in the Jiangjin night flickered behind her. Her pupils were still as deep as the sky, and there was an equally beautiful gentle smile on her beautiful face. What you want to know, I'll tell you now. Don't worry, I don't plan on becoming a member of his harem. The girl waved her hand. I'm just concerned about the person who is the most special to me in this world. Why does your words sound so dangerous, girl? Su Feng thought to himself. After bidding farewell to the legendary girl A, who didn't say her name, Su Xinxing began his return journey. On the way back he met the trio of Song Yu, Qin Xingyan and Mo Li. Oh, we actually went around half of Jiangjin before we found him. Song Yu looked like she was about to collapse from exhaustion. Because Emily didn't plan on seriously looking for senior. Qin Xingyan was much better. She didn't even sweat, but she looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Didn't she only bring us to food stalls? Landlord. Emily swallowed the pineapple oil in his hand and gave a thumbs up to Su Xinxing. Su Xinxing also secretly gave a well-done hand gesture. The only thing he wanted to do now was to go back to the apartment and find his half-sister, Chiketsu. Chapter 556. I want to go out and play too. Inside Sakura apartment, Chihaya Fukuyama let out a long sigh. I'm going out later, Chihaya-sama. Do you want to go for a walk with me? Sakura Kobayashi Asahi put the leftovers in the fridge after sealing them in plastic wrap, and then calmly asked Chizeo Yamanaka. By the way, the reason why there was leftover dinner was because neither Su Xinxing nor Emily called to inform the people at home if they wanted to go home for dinner. As a result, Asahi Sakurakanji could only cook as much as he usually did when Emily was there. However, none of them came back, so most of the food was left over. The second chef of Sakura apartment, Asahi Sakurakanji, complained, Oh? Asahi, do you want to go out and buy something? Chihaya Fukuyama seemed to be interested in this suggestion. Actually, the BL Dojinshi series of Sengoku Banana that I bought online has arrived in Jiangjin. I plan to pick it up myself. The maid girl held her face with both hands and showed an intoxicated smile full of anticipation. Ah, look at that smile, it's so cute. Chihaya Fukuyama covered his forehead and was speechless. Why is this girl's nature so rotten to this extent? Then Chihaya-sama, no, I'm not going. In order to avoid being looked at strangely by passers-by, Chihaya Fukuyama quickly distanced himself from the other party. Chihaya, do you want to go for a walk with Wolf? As soon as she looked away from Asahi Sakurakanji, her eyes met the dog girl's. The latter happily took out a dog leash from the cupboard beside him. Come on, let's talk about BL. Chihaya Fukuyama immediately turned around and continued to talk to Asahi Sakurakanji. Asahi Sakurakanji was flattered. Unfortunately, in the end, Chihaya Fukuyama still felt that she couldn't talk about BL. So she turned her attention to the little girl Chiketsu, who was lying on the sofa in a daze. Although the last tenant of Sakura apartment, Yu Jingjing, was right next to her, this otaku girl had to make up her mind to go to the convenience store dozens of meters away, let alone take a walk. Chiketsu, do you want to go out with your sister later? Chiketsu came back to her senses and looked at Chihaya Fukuyama in a daze. If it was in the past, the little girl would have happily agreed. However, she seemed a little strange today. Chinzao. Elder sister, I'd better not go. Little Chiyoyu shook her head and refused. What's wrong? Chihaya Fukuyama was keenly aware of the little girl's abnormality and asked with concern. The little girl hesitated for a long time before she finally whispered, I've been having the illusion that I'm seeing Blue recently. Blue was the little girl's kitten before her parents passed away. They had also passed away a long time ago. Her little face was red. It seemed that she felt that what she said sounded ridiculous. She thought that Chihaya Fukuyama and the others wouldn't believe her, so she was a little shy. Chihaya Fukuyama and the others were speechless when they saw the shadow of the black cat lying next to the little girl and yawning. The little girl had this cat ever since she moved to Sakura apartment. It was just that she couldn't see it before. Now it seemed that the little girl had lived in Sakura apartment for too long. Her astral vision had gradually awakened, so she could occasionally see the shadow of the kitten. Chihaya Fukuyama couldn't do anything about it. Usually Sushinshin protected the little girl very well. Even if Chiketsu was surrounded by supernatural beings, none of them had ever intruded into the little girl's life. This made the little girl the only person in Sakura apartment who still lived in the surface world. But now this stability would gradually weaken as time passed. She probably misunderstood Chihaya Fukuyama's silence. The little girl forced a smile and said, "I'll go back to my room first. This is going to be troublesome." Watching the little girl's back disappear down the stairs, Chihaya Fukuyama sighed softly. "I hope that Sugai has a way to solve it." Chiketsu had experienced life and death, so he was much more mature than his peers. How could she be fooled by Chihaya Fukuyama's awkward expression? But she was still young, so she couldn't understand what Chihaya Fukuyama's expression meant. Back in her room, the little girl threw herself on the soft bed. She sniffed the smell of the sun on the thick sheets that had just been changed because of the cold weather. She thought about the shadow of the kitten that she had seen recently. What was going on? Unfortunately, in this situation, let alone a little girl like her, even if an adult came here without knowing about the inner world that was buried under the surface of the world and filled with supernatural forces, they would only be at a loss in this situation. The little girl who thought hard to no avail could only sigh. She turned over like a salted fish and faced the ceiling. Her long black hair spread out like seaweed on the small single bed. She took out the necklace that Su Xinxing had given her and carefully looked at the pendant on the necklace. The pendant of the necklace was a silver ring, somewhat similar to the ring part of a ring. The edges of the ring were inlaid with crystals that sparkled like broken diamonds, seemingly expensive. At the center of the ring, there was a crystal fragment that would refract rainbow-colored light under the sunlight. This was given to her by Su Xinxing not long after the little girl moved to Sakura's apartment. At the time, Su Xinxing said that it was a gift from Blue. The little girl was happy and accepted it without thinking much. But now that she occasionally saw the shadow of the kitten, she couldn't help but feel that Su Xinxing's words were a bit strange. Was it an illusion? Chapter 557. Little Chiyoyu sneezed as she finally recovered from her dazed state of being at a loss due to the upheaval. It seemed that the temperature here was much lower than in Jiangjin. Chiketsu, who was still wearing a short-sleeved shirt, curled up slightly and rubbed his arms. He then walked towards the wooden house, trembling. It was a small wooden house that looked like it came out of a fairy tale. It was built with logs and looked small and delicate, like a delicate toy that was displayed in a boutique cabinet and used for decoration rather than playing with. It was very beautiful. There was some firewood piled behind the wooden house, and the surrounding flower beds were filled with colorful, beautiful but nameless flowers. Everything was as beautiful as a fairy tale. The only thing that was not right was that this kind of wooden house should appear in a forest. "Excuse me, is anyone home?" A child's emotions changed much faster than an adult's. Little Chiyoyu, who was a little timid earlier, forgot about her fear and became a little more lively after most of her attention was drawn to the wooden house. Since her mind had not been corrupted by web novels, the little girl probably thought that she was dreaming. After a while, a reply came from the wooden house. "Who is it?" The voice was crisp and pleasant, but also slightly shrill. It seemed that the owner of the voice was either a girl or a cute boy who had yet to change his voice. Why did he emphasize the word cute? Before Chiketsu could figure out how to answer the question, there was a soft dong 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 sound from inside the house. The door of the wooden house was opened. Standing at the entrance, standing on tiptoe to open the door, was a round-faced little girl who was shorter than Chiketsu. She was about half the height of the wooden door. She was wearing a simple hemp dress. Her bright silver hair was casually draped behind her head, as if it had not been taken care of. Chiketsu had seen people with similar hair color. The Pomeranian sister in Sakura's apartment had long silver hair, but there was a touch of beige in the silver. It was not that it was ugly, but it gave people a feeling that it was not pure enough. Theoretically speaking, a person's hair shouldn't be as shiny as silver. However, the little girl in front of him really did have a head of shiny silver hair, but it didn't have the slightest tinge of metallic luster. I didn't expect there to be a living person in this world other than me. It doesn't matter if you are a good person or a bad person. Come in and have a rest. The silver-haired little girl seemed to be very happy. She did not care about Chiketsu's opinion and directly pulled him into the house. Wait a minute. Wow, you are so strong. Chiketsu was shocked. He wanted to struggle, but he found that he could not break free from the hands of the little girl who was even smaller than him. Ah, don't look at me like that. In terms of strength, whether it is the two-headed ogre or the behemoth, they are no match for me. After pushing Chiketsu onto the only sofa in the house, the little girl ran to the countertop and seemed to be doing something. I'm sorry, I don't understand the two examples you gave me. Chiketsu shifted his little butt and said anxiously, it's okay. Those are animals that only exist in my hometown. It's normal that you don't know about them. The silver-haired little girl was in a good mood as she hummed a song. My name is Chiketsu. What's your name? Chiketsu asked as he looked around the house. The interior of the small house was not as exaggerated as it looked. It was much simpler. However, the fireplace, carpet, sofa, and some decorative bonsai hanging paintings and deer head specimens on the walls gave the house an elegant charm that was completely different from the style of the Celestial Empire. Tanya Eshiwasu. The little girl who called herself Tanya carefully placed 2 cups of what looked like black tea on the coffee table next to Chiketsu. It seemed that she went to the countertop to make the tea. You're in luck. I just boiled the water and you came over. Dunya pulled over a chair from the side and sat down. She picked up the teacup and took a sip, upon which a warm smile immediately appeared on her face. Sorry? Chiketsu, who didn't know how to respond, tilted his head and swallowed his thanks. In short, he apologized first. Why are you apologizing? Tanya looked at him strangely. Well, it's probably because no matter what the situation is, after apologizing things won't get worse. Chiketsu thought hard and replied. Then he followed Tanya's example. He picked up the cup of hot tea and took a sip. As a result, he stuck his tongue out and tears appeared in the corners of his eyes. But if you keep apologizing, life will only become bitter. Tanya pretended to be an adult and then winked at Chiketsu. That's what my father said. Where is Tanya's father? Chiketsu put down the cup and asked curiously. I don't know. Tanya shook her head. Her beautiful silver hair swayed with the little girl's movements. It was very eye-catching in the slightly dim room. My father is missing. Uncle Jambert and I have been looking for him for a long time, but we couldn't find him. What about your mother? Chiketsu asked again. He passed away a long time ago. The other party took another sip of tea and then replied. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Chiketsu, who was sensible, immediately showed a sad expression. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that even Tanya's silver hair became a little dimmer because of her master's sadness. Well, actually, my parents have also passed away. In order to comfort the other party, Chiketsu thought for a long time and could only say this in the end. And they passed away not long ago. Oh. Is that so? Seems that the two of us are a little alike. Tanya cheered up and smiled at Chiketsu. By the way, after your parents passed away, what did you do? Do you live alone? Chiketsu shook his head. My brother took me to his house. Speaking of his brother, Chiketsu's originally sad face immediately showed a happy smile. Sure enough, children's emotions change quickly. Brother? Tanya blinked her big eyes and looked at her in confusion. Yes, that's right. In fact, before my parents passed away, I didn't know that I had a brother. So Chiketsu happily told his new friend about his brother. Chapter 558. So that's how it is you transmigrated from another world. After listening to Chiketsu's story, Tonya crossed her arms and pretended to be mature. She closed her eyes and nodded. Transmigration? Chiketsu was obviously not familiar with this concept. He blinked his eyes in confusion. Generally speaking, it means going from one world to another. Tonia tried to explain to the girl. Am I dead? But obviously something went wrong during the transmission of the information. Chiketsu's chubby little face was full of shock. Why would you think of that? Tonia puffed her cheeks, looking a little angry. Because when my parents died, my relatives said that they went to another world. The expression on Chiketsu's face became even more sorrowful, but combined with the content of his words, it was funny. No, although I can't tell what's wrong, it's definitely not like that. Tonia slapped the table and said. The 2 tea sets on the table bounced up and down as she slapped them. At this moment little Chiyoyu's tears were already dripping down. Tonia could only comfort her in a hurry. At this moment the behavior of the two was completely opposite to their height and appearance. The smaller Tonia's behavior was more mature, more like an elder sister. Tonia, did you also transmigrate to this world? After sobbing for a while, Chiketsu finally calmed down and asked Tonia in a low voice. Well, actually, I've been looking for my father. Dunia put her hands on her knees and looked a little embarrassed. I remember a long time ago I was curled up in a dark place alone, unable to see or hear anything. Until one day Uncle Jeongbor came to me and said that he would accompany me to find my father. After that I went to many places with him. As she spoke, Dunia began to tell Chiyoyu about some of the things she had seen and heard during her journey. Most of them were like fairy tales to little Chiyoyu, absurd and unbelievable. There were 3 planets that were connected by a gigantic sword, a super deep underground abyss that was deeper than the planet itself, a world where time was frozen and the surface of the sea was harder than diamond, a world where the soil was like water and all creatures lived in a world of liquid clay, and a mysterious world that was supported by a scepter. Little Chiyoyu was already treating them as stories by the end of her narration. Just like that, the man the girl called Uncle Jeongbor brought the little girl through one world after another, all for the sake of finding that irresponsible father of the little girl. But when we came to this world there was an accident. At this point the girl's expression became much gloomier. This is a world that is on the verge of destruction. The world itself has begun to fall apart and even the essence of the world has disappeared. Even Uncle Jeongbor is helpless. The Spear of Seven's ability to travel between worlds lost its effect after this world fell apart and lost the concept of world. So we are stuck here. Stuck here? Does that mean we can't get out? Chiketsu asked incredulously with his eyes wide open. Yes, that's it. Tonia nodded. Although there was a chance to escape at first, when he sensed that this world was about to be destroyed, Uncle Jeongbor gave up the opportunity to escape and tried to save this world. Unfortunately, even though Uncle Jeongbor tried his best to save this world, he still failed in the end. This world still self-destructed, and there doesn't seem to be any other survivors nearby. Even this grassland was planted by me little by little after the space stabilized a bit. It's very tiring. Although I'm not too sure, traveling all over the place and being trapped here in the end, don't you think it's hard for you? Chiketsu asked with some pity. Don't you blame that Uncle Jeongbor? Although it's a bit hard, I don't blame him. Because Uncle Jeongbor said that he and my father are the same type of people. What do you mean? Chiketsu was confused. Although I'm not boasting, my father is a very amazing person. He has accomplished many great deeds and saved tens of thousands of worlds. He is regarded as a great hero by the inhabitants of many worlds. Even Uncle Jeongbor thinks so. At the last moment of this world he said that if it was my father who was here he would definitely be able to stop the destruction of this world. Dunia's eyes were full of splendor. It seemed that she really admired her father. But saving the world is also relative. As the price of saving the world, I'm afraid that countless enemies have died in his hands. Because he was born on a peaceful earth, Chiketsu, who had no concept of killing, still had a puzzled look on his face. Seeing him like this, Dunia could not help but laugh. Soon after, the silver-haired little girl regained her previous sorrowful expression. Uncle Jeongbor once said that when a person's hands are stained with blood, their heart will gradually become desolate. In order to not be devoured by killing, they will have a pillar to support their own spirit. The reason why Uncle Jeongbor still extended a helping hand to this world and the inhabitants of this world when he knew that he could not stop the destruction of this world is probably because the pillar of his heart is the sense of justice that comes from his nature. What does this have to do with your father? Little Chiketsu, who could not understand this, asked. Because my father's spiritual pillar is all broken. Dunia's voice became solemn and clear. Uncle Jeongbor said that when he last saw my father, My father seemed to have been abandoned by all the worlds. He was just clenching his teeth and holding on by relying on his unreasonable strength. If this continues, sooner or later his heart will shatter like this world. So before that, I have to find him and become his pillar. At this moment, little Chiketsu, who still did not understand the situation, suddenly felt that the silver-haired girl in front of him was exuding a holy and pure light. Because the ground of this world is flat, so if there is enough light you can see very far away. Dunia nodded. That's the center of this space, about 100 kilometers away from the grassland. 100 kilometers. Chiketsu was shocked by the unit of length that was rarely used in school. It's a kilometer from my brother's apartment to the commercial street, and it takes 15 minutes to walk there. 100 kilometers is 115 minutes, and an hour is 60 minutes. If that's the case, the little girl counted with her fingers for a long time before she finally figured it out. He was shocked. It takes 20 hours? And it was wrong. It's too long to walk and it's troublesome to carry food. So we have to choose a faster way. Dunia put her hand over her eyes. The weather's good today. It's suitable to fly there. Fly there. Didn't I tell you? Dunia took 2 steps forward, then suddenly turned around with her hands behind her back. She smiled sweetly at Chiketsu. I'm a dragon. In the next moment, a pair of silver dragon wings that were far too large for Dunia's short and petite body unfurled from her back. Under the illumination of the white light from the sky, the wings glittered as if they were made of metal. Little Chiyue stared blankly for a while, then like a child who had seen her favorite toy, although she was still young, she approached Dunia with sparkling eyes. Chapter 560. This pillar feels a bit strange. At first, Chiketsu thought it was a cylindrical mountain. After all, nothing was strange in the dream world. But upon closer inspection, he found that the mountain that seemed to connect the sky and the earth was not navy blue like the usual mountain rocks. Instead, it was closer to the color of flesh. That's not a pillar. Dunia, who was carrying little Chiyoyu on her back, was flying in a superhuman posture. When she heard little Chiyoyu's words, she replied with a bitter smile. Mountain? Chiketsu raised his little head a little, but the wind outside made a gurgling sound. He quickly lowered his head and pressed it against Dunia's back. It's a finger. Dunia didn't seem to notice what was happening behind her. She slowed down a little to prepare for the landing. She explained to Chiketsu. After Uncle Jeongbor lost the Spear of 7 that Dad and the others built for him in this world, he faced the end of the world with his own strength. Like Dad's former companions, he transcended the shackles of the power of heroes, broke through the constraints of the world, completed the self-consistency of the law, and achieved the true sublimation of life in the true sense. She said softly. Strangely, in the whistling wind produced by flying at a relatively fast speed in the sky, her soft words should be drowned out and dissipated in an instant, but Chiketsu heard her words in full. It was a pity that the content was too profound for little Chiyoyu to comprehend. If he chose to retreat at that time, Uncle Jeongbor should be able to survive like me with this body that has transcended the world, but in the end he decided to face his own death. At the last moment of the world, in order to preserve the remaining fire of civilization, he used all his strength and struck at the existence that brought about the end of the world. After that blow, his sturdy body was torn apart. But thanks to this, although this world was fragmented, it was not turned into ashes by the catastrophe and completely disappeared. And in the space we're in right now, because of me, Uncle Jeongbor left behind 3 fingers. The one that supports the sky is his index finger, the one that turns into the earth is his thumb, and the one that evolves into all living things is his little finger. He probably feels sorry for me and my father, so he wants me to live a good life in this space until my father can find me. Hearing this, Chiketsu touched the back of Dunia's head for some reason. Dunia? ? Hey, I was going to pat your head, Dunia. Chiketsu stuck out his tongue and said, but my head is too short and your wings are in the way, so I can only touch the back of your head. Is this a new prank? Of course not. Although I don't quite understand what you're saying, You must have a good relationship with that Uncle Jeongbor, right? Little Chiu Yu's voice became much gentler. I once watched the person closest to me leave. At that time I couldn't stop crying. In the end I cried until I couldn't even cry anymore. If I didn't meet Big Brother I think I would have continued to be sad for a long time. Although I don't know what kind of feelings you had when you sent that uncle off, I think it must have been something very, very painful. That's why I wanted to pat your head like Big Brother to comfort you. Really? If that's the case you're more than 100 years too late. Dunia complained, but her voice was as gentle as a spoiled child. At this point, Dunia finally landed on the slightly undulating ground. Although she tried her best to be as gentle as possible, Chiketsu still slipped off Dunia's back due to the inertia of landing. He fell face down on the grass and let out a cute whimper. Sorry because I've never flown with someone before. Dunia hurriedly helped him up and apologized profusely. It's okay, I'm fine. Chiketsu, whose nose was red from the bump, waved his hand and said. Because of the bump, his voice sounded a little strange. Good. Dunia breathed a sigh of relief. Then her gaze turned to the towering pillar not far away. If there's a place in this space that's the most vulnerable and most likely to be transmigrated, it's here. Is it like this? Chiketsu rubbed his nose and said in a muffled voice. Dunia, you haven't seen me in a long time. Are there other living people in this space? At this moment, a dark shadow suddenly shrouded the two of them. Little Chiu Yu's movements were a little stiff as she looked towards the black shadow. Then he saw a muscular man who could cosplay as Hercules without feeling out of place. The little girl was so scared that she hid behind Dunia. Don't be afraid, Chiketsu. He's the Uncle Jeongbor I was talking about. Dunia still looked quite cheerful. But the moment she said that, little Chua trembled even more violently, like a little quail that had shrunk into a ball in winter. But didn't you just say that Uncle Jeongbor is already dead? Yes, he's dead. Dunia nodded. Haha, and his death was quite miserable. The biggest piece of his body was his finger. Can you believe it? Mengnan was also quite cheerful as he used a barbarian style to talk about his own death. He actually looked very happy. Chiketsu's eyes almost turned into question marks. She felt that her worldview was about to collapse at this moment. Actually, there's nothing strange about it. This world doesn't have an independent reincarnation system like the world I've been to before. Instead, like most worlds, the soul of a living being is directly connected to the world's origin after death. Therefore, after the world collapses and the origin disappears, the concept of life and death becomes very vague. Even the dead can reappear and be treated as a type of soul. Dunia seemed to have seen through Chiketsu's doubts and began to explain to her. Chiketsu still looked confused. But this time, Dunia didn't seem to want to explain too much. She just gently tiptoed and touched Chiketsu's head. It's okay. Leave everything to us. Just treat this as a dream. ? Chiketsu's face was full of doubts, but in the end she nodded. Oh, this girl. At this time the muscular man on the opposite side seemed to have noticed something. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Chiketsu. After seeing that the latter was even more afraid, he showed a relieved expression and turned to look at Dunia. Forget it, Dunia. What's the matter? I want to send her outside. Dunia obediently touched Chiketsu's head again. Then she told the muscular man about what happened earlier. You really know how to make trouble for me. The muscular man sighed, thought for a while and then said, if your guess is right, this is indeed the weakest part of the realm. But because of my finger, ordinary means can't pass through the world wall. Is there no way at all? Dunia asked unwillingly. Although they haven't known each other for a long time, she did see Chiketsu as her own sister. She really cared about her sister. Not really. The best way to break through my defense is for me to throw her up. If she can cross over, she probably has a special constitution that allows her to pass through the world wall. But the problem is that when I throw her out, to be honest, it's no different from throwing her into a magic crystal cannon made by the dwarves. I'm afraid that the moment she leaves the cannon, she will be blown into a pile of minced meat. The muscular man shook his head and explained the problem to Dunia. Ziwatakana. Nanny. By the way, what does this conversation mean? Your father liked to say this to us back then. The muscular man subconsciously continued the conversation. I don't know. Dunia replied with a cheerful smile. But if you're only worried about leaving the canon, I can solve this problem. Dunia turned around and came face to face with Chiketsu. Then the silver-haired little girl grabbed the black-haired little girl's hands. As the two interlocked fingers, the silver-haired little girl moved closer to the black-haired little girl, and the two were almost touching each other. Dunia also turned her head so that her cheek was tightly pressed against Chiketsu's face. The way the two little Lolas stuck to each other was very cute and pleasing to the eye. Especially Dunia, who looked happy and proud. Little Chiou, on the other hand, looked a lot shyer. The two completely different appearances made them even more adorable. If there was a circle of lilies around them, they could be directly photographed and used as a hanging painting. Look at what? Mengnan was confused. He thought for a moment, then said with some confusion, "If your father was here, he would be very happy. But my aesthetic standards are not the same as humans. I prefer strong women. I used to be a green-skinned female beastman in the hills north of Oravaya. The kind with fangs on their chin. They're very sexy. I have no interest in normal human women, especially those without breasts and buttocks." "Uncle Jambird, are you an idiot?" Dunia's eyes turned into cute crescents. "Your father always says that about me. Why are you becoming more and more like that guy in this kind of place? What I mean is, you can throw me out too. My cloud scales can protect Chiketsu." Dunia continued. The muscular man thought for a moment and then hammered his hand. "Maybe it will work. After all, it's someone else's idea." The muscular man had always followed the maxim of acting when he thought of something. Therefore, after discussing some emergency measures with Dunia, the muscular man put his hand on the ground in a half-kneeling position and had the two of them stand on it. "Hurry up. After all, I don't have a body now. The time I can materialize is limited." Chiketsu was a little scared at first, but for some reason when he saw Dunia's encouraging eyes, most of the worry in his heart disappeared. Just like that, they stood on the muscular man's palm that was several times bigger than a casserole. "Hold on tight, Chiketsu. The range of my cloud scales is a little small." "Okay." Chiketsu immediately hugged Dunia's body tightly. Dunia was shorter than Chiketsu and was directly suffocated by his bare hug. Fortunately, Chiketsu soon realized that something was wrong and loosened his arms slightly. The next moment, the muscular man's muscles suddenly bulged, and the blue veins on his arms were violently protruding. Before Chiketsu could react, they were already thrown into the air by the muscular man. Chiketsu let out an involuntary cry. "Don't worry, I will protect you." Dunia's timely voice made the girl's fear fade away. Due to the violent friction with the air, their surroundings had turned orange-red, which represented the high temperature. However, Dunia's cloud scale seemed to be very impressive. Not only did it isolate the damage, but it also isolated the high temperature. The originally vast and boundless earth beneath their feet had also become visible. The only thing that didn't change was the finger that supported the sky beside them. After flying for a long time, when the land below them became the size of a chessboard, finally, a strange hole appeared in the sky. At the same time, the muscular man seemed to have used up all his strength. The speed of their ascent gradually slowed until it came to a stop, as if they would fall at any time. Dunia. While Chiketsu was at a loss, Dunia let go of Chiketsu's hand, turned to Chiketsu's back and spread her dragon wings. Just now, he and Emily had confirmed that the other world fragment in Chiketsu's pendant was not lost, but it recovered a bit of the concept of the world, so it was expelled by the world where Earth was. Just like the reversal of the process of a normal world turning into a lattice world. If that space was given billions of years as a unit of time, sooner or later it would become a real world again. Without any clues, trying to find that world again was as difficult as trying to find a piece of sand in the desert that only had half of its original size left. Unlock another layer of the seal, I'm 20% sure. Emily nodded. What about the probability of the world being destroyed because you unlock the seal? 80%. If it was more than a year ago, Su Xinxing would not have met Qin Xingyan, Songyu, Chiketsu and the others. Chihaya Fukuyama. As the first batch of tenants, am I being treated too badly? At that time, let alone a 20% chance and an 80% chance of the world being destroyed, even if there was a 99.9% chance of the world being destroyed and only a 1% chance of finding the other party, he would probably do it without hesitation. But now it was no longer possible. Although he also had the option of bringing Mo Lee to the barren world to unlock the seal. After the third layer of the seal was unlocked, Mo Lee's state was already very unstable. Su Shenxing even felt that his unstable state was related to Mo Lee's uncontrollable magic. Who knew what would happen when the fourth layer of the seal was unlocked? At that time, even if he was there, he would not dare to bring Mo Lee back to the world where Earth was. He could only drift in the void and look for the person who could reseal Mo Lee. But even if he was lucky, it would probably take hundreds or even thousands of years to find that person who could reseal Mo Lee. By that time, even long-lived practitioners like Qin Xingyan might have died, and mortals like Song Yu might not even have ashes left after being cremated. Therefore, after a long period of hesitation, Su Shenxing let out a long sigh. Forget it, landlord. Because they were of the same mind, Mo Lee could naturally feel Su Shenxing's conflicted and uncomfortable feelings. The little girl walked briskly to Su Shenxing, then reached out and rubbed Su Shenxing's furrowed brows. Although she did not have any expression on her face, one could feel that she was distressed. If that Dong Nia is really the daughter of Turgan mine, then sooner or later we will meet again. Su Shenxing suddenly smiled, then reached out and rubbed Mo Lee's soft little face. The little girl broke free from his evil clutches, then covered her face that was red from Su Shenxing's rubbing, showing a dissatisfied expression. Su Shenxing, on the other hand, did not care about the little girl's expression and stretched lazily. I'm hungry after thinking about it for so long. Emily, let's go eat dinner. The little girl, who was full of resentment, immediately became spirited. Speaking of which, is dinner tomato hot pot? The little girl nodded, then blinked her wine-red eyes. Landlord, how did you know? Because we are of the same mind. Oh, the same mind is amazing. Mo Lee shook her head and sighed expressionlessly, her golden side ponytail swaying with her movements. After walking out of the room, Su Shenxing looked back at Chiketsu, who was sleeping soundly, and the cat guardian spirit beside her, then gently closed the door. Little Chiu Yu, who was in her dreams, was completely unaware of this. She was like a spoiled kitten, twisting her body and burying her petite body in the blanket as she mumbled in a muffled voice. Dong Nia. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.